ready as soon as you are. If we want to
Yep.
start and do any openings or not, but
Yeah.
we
I
can
think we.
wait and let
Yep.
people come in, or we can go ahead and start.
Yep. I mean, it is 7:01. I think Steadfast is going to take a little bit of time, but not super long.
Okay.
So it should be good. I think we can go whenever you want to get started. So
Okay. I'll count us down to 3, and then just like normal, I'll open us up and then give it off to you, probably to talk about the matchup. Or probably maybe talk about what we've seen so far in the tournament leading up to this.
sounds good.
All right. We will transition in 3, 2, 1. Welcome everybody to the LorcanaHQ Grand Finals with WalterYensid versus Ssteadfast. For those of you that don't know, this has been I think it was a 6-round tournament into a top 8 single elimination. We started all the way back in August 9th. We wanted to give players the opportunity to play out their games, so they had 48 hours to play their games, which is why it's taken so long. We've seen so many games. My name is Brandon, also known as B Squared. I'm co-hosted here with my amazing co-host Jay. Jay, why don't you say hi, and why don't you give us some highlights on some of the decks we've seen all the way up to this point and where we're at right now?
Sounds great. Hi, my name is Jay. And I'll be doing commentary with Brandon. And we are super excited to be here and talk about it. So let me see if I can kind of recap and think back. I know Medina on the LorcanaHQ has posted the top 8 decks that our players in the LorcanaHQ constructed tournament has ran. And so if you want to kind of check out the specifics, definitely go check it out there. But so for we casted many games, focusing on Lao Shi Mahan, I think his full name is. And so I think that was the main deck that was really cool and unique there. So he was running a what was it? Sapphire Ruby items kind of deck where he capitalizes on the Sword of Truths and the poisoned apples for removal. And like with other kind of synergies such as the I keep on forgetting what was the crab name in Moana. Tamatoa, that's it. Yes,
Yeah.
Tamatoa and Maurice kind of there. We've also seen a bunch of kind of other control type decks focusing on Ruby Amethyst, which you're going to see today. And then we've seen some faster decks like Franz, who's ran his Emerald Steel, was it? Or I forgot what Franz ran. Honestly,
I think it was Emerald Amethyst.
Yes, Emerald Amethyst. And I wasn't sure if there were any other kind of aggro decks like Emerald Amber or Emerald Steel or Amber Steel types. But I'm sure you'll see like kind of on the top 8 there is kind of both the aggro varieties, that mid-range some steel decks, as well as the control setups. And so kind of today let me just take a look at the players. Okay, so they're asking if they're good to start. So let's I'll just let them know that they can start, but and then I'll kind of talk about the matchup that they are going to be playing today.
Yeah, so basically today, Ssteadfast and Walter both. As you can see, we have fancy new little things on the sides of the screen where you can see their tournament record. Walter went 7-0-1, Ssteadfast went 1-7-0, so both doing a great job. Both players are playing Ruby and Amethyst, slightly different versions of it, but Jay, you can get into that a little bit.
Yep, I definitely the first thing I noticed, especially with thank you shout out to Threevo for kind of doing a bunch of work on the mods, bringing us some better kind of interfaces. The first thing I saw was Steadfast is running a 64 card deck. So that is really key to know. He probably runs a 64 card deck just because of that mirror matchup and wanting to avoid decking out. And we'll see as Brendan and I say, this is probably going to be a pretty long match for the best of three. And so just we're planning on being here for as long as the players need in order to win their games. One of the key aspects you're gonna see here is that because both players are playing the Amethyst Ruby control deck, there's a lot of cards in both players' deck that are specifically teched against aggro players. So, for example, we can see uh, on is it Steadfast? Who is Steadfast on the top? Yes, Steadfast
Yes.
has cards like the Mini Mouse, Gaston, and Rafiki, and we're pretty sure the moment both players realize the sort of matchups they're going to be playing, those cards are probably not going to be super useful and are going to be inked immediately because essentially what it's going to come down to is who gets the faster draw and can either out resource their opponent, which essentially means that you just draw more cards each turn than your opponent through magic mirrors, through either kind of card draw mechanisms like Friend on the Other Side, or the Maleficence, or if you manage to draw more resources than your opponent consistently, then you can put more things on the board than your opponent can remove. And so you could kind of outpace and outpressure your opponent that way. However, a lot of these matchups tend to end up being that both players end up getting their magic mirrors on board and draws. And so both players are drawing a lot of cards and have plenty of removal in their hand. And so it ends up being like kind of a long pace of who just manages to utilize all of their cards and resources better and just outlasts the opponent. But at least that's like my experience from playing. These games could definitely turn out very differently. So we will see. Right from the get go. We definitely see that Walter has a bunch of high end, his 9 cost Maleficents, Ursula's, Be Prepared's, Dragonfires. But he just drew into a Gaston, which he's probably gonna play in order to just deal with or ink, I guess. So I guess he's totally okay with a Mini Mouse just questing for 1 each turn. It's gonna be slow enough that Walter's gonna be able to get up to his Be Prepared or Maleficent's Dragonfires and that sort of stuff. So we also just saw that Walter played a Befuddle to bounce back the Magic Mirror. And in general, I would say that if you're playing more of an aggro deck, bouncing back the Magic Mirror is a can be a great play just to prevent your opponent from questing, or sorry, just to prevent your opponent from drawing cards a lot early on in the game. However, in a control matchup, a lot of times I find that saving those befuddles for your own potential like magic mirrors or your own kind of cards that then you can just play and use again can actually be a little bit more beneficial, especially because my prediction is both players are going to get up to like at least 12, if not like 15 to 20 ink in this matchup. So we will see. Though right now it does seem like Steadfast is going pretty quickly in terms of how much lore he has. Though I'm sure that's gonna be stopped pretty soon by Walter once he gets to his removal.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Steadfast's list pairs up against Walter's, because we talked to Steadfast a little bit in his last match, and he talked about how he played a couple Mini Mouses, he played a couple Gastons, things to combat early game threats, which obviously he doesn't have to deal with here. But Walter doesn't really play many early game stuff. He plays a few Sergeant Tibbs, he plays a couple Gastons, and right now he's not drawing into any of them. And so the longer that Steadfast can keep these cheap units out on board, the closer and closer that he can get to that 20 lore. And this being a control matchup, once we get later and later into the game, we're going to start seeing a lot of those. I played this card and banish that card. Now I'm going to play this card and banish your card. And it's just going to go back and forth. And basically it's going to be who can waste or who can get rid of the opponent's resources the fastest. One thing looking back on the entirety of this tournament that I keep hearing us bring up over and over again is how important draws are to winning the game, just like you said. Even last game we saw with Steadfast, the game that he had a lot of trouble drawing cards was the game that he lost. And then the other games that he was able to get into his card draw, he did fine and was able to eliminate Franz and make it here into the finals. And we already see Steadfast has both Magic Mirror and Ursula's Cauldron on board, which is a really, really nasty combo. Yep. So for those of you that don't know, Ursula's Cauldron lets you look at the top two of your cards. You pick one of them and put them on the bottom and then put the other one back on top. So it essentially lets you filter. And then after you do that, you can use the Magic Mirror to draw that card. So you get to basically look at the top two cards of your deck and then pick which one that you want to put into your hand. Whereas Walter, he's having a really tough time. He doesn't have anything on board right now. The only draw card that I see is that Ursula that he's playing, which is going to take away a lore from Steadfast, and then it's going to allow him to draw one card. So if Walter wants to catch up, he's really going to have to start drawing into some of those draw cards. Like, I'm actually looking at the list. He doesn't even run Magic Mirror now that I'm looking at it.
I was about to say, Walter doesn't run Magic Mirror, which I would say is gonna be really rough against Mirror matchup, because essentially that means that his opponent is very likely gonna just be able to have just more resources in their hand than Walter does. Having said that, though, I don't it's still going to be pretty interesting to see if Walter makes an adjustment when he realizes the sort of kind of deck and playstyle he's playing, because Walter does run some jetsams and some evasive kind of characters that I think that makes it a little bit more unique. The fact that Walter runs the Mickey Mouses and the Jetsams that hopefully his opponent can't interact with as well with. But right now we can see that Ssteadfast has at least a Maleficent or Be Prepared or Elsa's to just delay that. And as we can see, each turn that the Magic Mirror is being used is just a little bit kind of more advantage to Ssteadfast. But we can see the Be Prepared is probably going to come down to stop the Mickey Mouse. Or nope. So while Ssteadfast just decides that he has plenty of resources, he can let his opponent get some lore with the Mickey Mouse and then deal with it a little bit later, hopefully when he can both draw and play out removal.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I want to bring up, which I think is kind of funny, is Walter has a history of being down in a game and somehow managing to come back. I don't think we've been able to stream any of those games, but he's told me about many games in this tournament where he was down. I think at one point he was down like 19-6 or something like that. And somehow he was able to come back. And I think that's in large part due to his Aladdin that he plays and being able to steal some lore away. And then come exploding out with those Mickeys evasive and questing for 4 lore over and over again. So I'm going to be very interested to see if he can pull something like this off. We see 2 Dragonfires and a Be Prepared, plus a Maleficent in his hand. So that's at least 4 ways that he can deal with anything that Ssteadfast puts on board. Obviously, Ssteadfast only has a Rafiki on board right now. So he doesn't have to worry about Ssteadfast gaining too much lore. But even though it might look like Walter's a little bit behind, Steadfast letting him keep this Mickey on board and even letting him quest for 4 once puts Walter a little bit closer to winning and makes it so that if Walter can stall out Steadfast long enough and use those Dragonfires and Maleficents to get rid of Steadfast things and then start dropping heavy characters like Mickey Mouse and like Elsa, there's a potential that Walter can come back, especially if he has the ability to steal some lore away with Aladdin.
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of looking at the board state right now, I would say though that the longer the game goes on, the more in favor of Steadfast the game will be. And essentially what we're seeing is just that while Walter has some resources in his hand size currently is at 6 cards. Earlier we saw that Steadfast was only at 3 cards, and now he's already at 5 cards, kind of catching up. And so it really kind of is going to start shifting in Steadfast's favor the longer the game goes. So I wonder if Walter is going to be able to recognize it and potentially try to close out the or just like try to move a little bit faster as kind of the game goes on. So right now Steadfast is at 9 ink. And so that's so he plays down the Maleficent, and so I think either we're gonna see a Be Prepared or some sort of removal come down from Walter's side to deal with the 4 lore on board that Steadfast is generating. So yep, it looks like it's going to be a Dragonfire on the Maleficent there. Walter's probably going to sing Friends on the Other Side. So Walter does have quite a bit of card draw, just not consistent card draw. And so we'll see if that really makes a difference as the game goes on.
Yeah, I think that really might make or break this game. You know, seeing the Magic Mirror come down so early from Steadfast, I think is really just going to give him so much steam to work with in this game. Whereas, well, like you said, Walter runs a lot of draw cards. He runs 4 Maleficent Sorcerers. He runs 4 Friends on the Other Side. He runs 4 Queens as well, and a few Ursulas. And so, like, he can draw into things that will allow him to draw more cards. But I think the ability to just have that Magic Mirror sticking on the board, being able to draw an extra card every single turn, not having to wait to draw into a card that then goes into your discard pile, is definitely going to give Steadfast the advantage here, especially in a control versus control matchup, where usually the difference comes down to who can draw the most cards and who runs out of resources first. And so if Steadfast is able to keep his hand full and he's able to continue to play Maleficents and Elsas and Dragonfires and things to take care of Walter's board, and Walter is not able to keep his hand full, which so far he's doing an okay job. He has 3 Friends on the Other Side in hand right now, so he's doing okay. But once he starts running out of those cards, it's going to be really difficult for Walter to stay ahead. And I'm actually quite impressed. Walter's been able to keep up as much as he has. And we can see him play the Friends on the Other Side now to draw 2 more cards. We see another Queen come into his hand. So luckily for Walter right now, he has a lot of options. He has a Dragonfire, a Be Prepared, a Maleficent in hand, also an Elsa. And luckily, we don't see anything too scary on Steadfast side of the field, even in Steadfast hand. He has a bunch of removal pieces, but that can be expected in this control matchup. What I'm really more scared of are seeing things like Elsas and dragons and things that are going to start questing for lots of lore, and especially things like Aladdin as well that can take trades. So I think
yeah. Oh,
go ahead.
I was about to say, and we just saw the pocket watch come down from Ssteadfast, which is another tool that's really difficult to deal with, especially when he combines that with Aladdin's. And so yeah, I just wanted to make that quick comment. Go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll highlight that combo for a little bit. For those that don't know, White Rabbit Pocket Watch, it's an item that stays on board, and it lets you give something rush when you play it, which basically means that that character can challenge the turn that they're played. And when you combo that with Aladdin Heroic Outlaw, which is a card that says when this character challenges and banishes another character, your opponents lose 2 lore and you gain 2 lore, that's a 4 lore swing in 1 turn, which can be detrimental in some matchups. And so sorry, I had a little thing pop up. And so if we see those Aladdins come out and we see Walter doesn't have ways to deal with it, it's going to be difficult. Luckily, in this matchup, Walter runs his bomb cards, I like to call them, things like his Ursulas, his Mickey Mouses, and his Elsas are going to be a little bit difficult to touch with Aladdin because Aladdin only has 5 strength, whereas Elsa has 6 willpower, I believe, and Mickey is evasive, so Aladdin can't touch it. And then Ursula has a whopping 8 willpower as well. So, and Aladdin may not be as detrimental, but the more items that come down on board from Steadfast side, the scarier it kind of gets for Walter, because again, those are just things that are going to sit on the board. There's no way for Walter to get rid of them unless he draws another Befuddle. I know he's used 1. I don't know if he's used a second one, but he's only running 2, and the Befuddle can only target things that I think are 2 cost or less.
Yep. I think Walter just used his second Befuddle to return the Cauldron again. So he that was both of his Befuddles there.
Yeah, so Walter's out of Befuddles. He's basically out of ways to interact with these items that Steadfast has on board. And so Steadfast is just getting so much value from these items. And like, I mean, I think if you're Walter, you have to try to play quickly. I mean, you know that you're not, you know that there's likely removal and things in Steadfast's hand, but I just don't feel like Walter has a lot of time to wait around. I feel like the longer this game goes on, the further and further Steadfast is going to be able to get ahead.
I think the main problem here is that both players have just enough, like, their hands are just loaded with, like, board wipes and control. Both players have 2 Be Prepareds, a Maleficent. Walter has 2 additional Dragonfires, and an Elsa. But I think the issue here is that that also means that it's very, very, very difficult to gain lore in this game, because anything that you play is just probably not going to be able to gain you lore. And so what I'm actually really interested in is typically when I see a mirror matchup, cards that I tend to want to ink very early. Like, for example, I was surprised that Walter didn't ink his Befuddles, or like Ssteadfast didn't ink his Maleficent, because essentially, I guess like if he's only running 1 magic mirror, then he needs to use the Maleficents to draw. But a lot of times, because you can constantly draw with the magic mirror, a lot of that single like kind of draw cards like Maleficent or Friends on the other side ends up becoming cards that you can just ink, especially because as a control player, if you're getting a lot of cards in your hand, sometimes it's really beneficial to have a lot of ink to play around with. But as we can see, maybe potentially like having kind of gone through almost half of his deck, Ssteadfast only has 1 magic mirror, so he might not be running too many copies of the magic mirror. And so Walter plays out the Mickey Mouse, which once again we're gonna see kind of just how difficult it is to put lore on the board, because I think that's definitely gonna merit a Be Prepared, especially since it can take out 2 high profile targets, both the Queen, which allows Walter to draw additional cards, and the Mickey Mouse, which has evasive. But it's essentially, when we said Walter was going to have potentially issues with card draw, I think the Queen definitely helps. That's a card where a character where when you play, it can just you can exert it and you can draw a card from it. But it seems like Ssteadfast is just allowing Walter to get the card draw from the Queen. And one theory behind that is maybe he doesn't really mind Walter drawing cards because of the deck difference. Notice Walter has 28 cards remaining in his deck, whereas Ssteadfast has 35 cards. And so I think Ssteadfast is perfectly okay. Just if Walter keeps on drawing cards and isn't able to get to 20 lore, eventually Walter will lose because he runs out of cards in his deck faster than his opponent.
That's exactly what I was about to bring up, and I'm really glad that you did. We mentioned earlier that Steadfast runs was it 64 cards, I think, instead of
Yes.
60. And oftentimes I've heard in this matchup, specifically between the Ruby and the Amethyst deck, a lot of times it comes down to who decks out first. And so I really wonder if that's what it's going to come down to, especially as much as we've talked about Walter having so much trouble drawing cards. I mean, Walter started with less cards than Steadfast, so they're actually kind of at the same spot right now. Like they've been drawing just about as many cards as the other.
Mhm.
If you take away 4 cards from Steadfast, he's at 30, Walter's at 27. So Walter's actually drawing cards slightly faster than Steadfast is, which I think is kind of funny, especially since he doesn't run the Magic Mirror. But, as this game goes on, you mentioned that there are so many removal pieces. We see 5 Be Prepareds in both of these players' hands right now, and not to even mention the Maleficents and Dragonfires and things that are sitting there as well. So you just kind of play this ping pong game back and forth between these control players, where one person puts down a card that is a problem, and the other person gets rid of it, and then they put down a card that's a problem, and then the other person gets rid of it, and it's like there's a lot of kind of nothing that happens in these rounds. And granted, there's a lot of thinking, right? You're trying to predict what's in your opponent's hand. There's definitely better times to use some cards over others. And so not to say that these are easy decisions, but there's just a lot of, they're almost at this stalemate where I'm going to try to play something that needs to be dealt with, and then it's going to get dealt with. And because that happens, and because lore doesn't get, our characters can't quest very much for lore, sometimes it does just come down to the decking out, and you end up drawing all of your cards, and the games go really long. And so we'll see if that ends up happening in this game, and if those
Y-
extra 4 cards really do make the difference.
And one other thing to keep in mind, now that I saw Ssteadfast played out a shield, is now that you have Pocket Watch and Shield, that Aladdin becomes even more devastating. And I wonder if we'll see kind of Walter recognize that. Essentially, what it means is if Walter plays out any character that has less than 5 attack, and it's exerted, and as well as probably the Aladdin or anything else, any Aladdin that his opponent play can attack into a character with 5 or less attack with the Pocket Watch, because Pocket Watch gives rush, and then he can unexert it with the shield and attack again. So essentially, with the setup, and this is why a lot of times, as a control player, you want a lot of ink, and you want to try to ink all of the cards that you don't need, is because you can kind of pull off pretty insane combos, where an Aladdin can attack into 2 or sometimes even 3 creatures on your opponent and essentially gain you 6 lore or 4 lore out of nowhere. But we just saw most recently that play where Walter had an Aladdin exerted for 2 lore, and his opponent Ssteadfast just played out an Aladdin and gave it rush with Pocket Watch and just ran it into his Aladdin, turning back their clock, making them lose 2 lore and gaining 2 lore himself. And so all of a sudden he went from 13 to 15 lore, and that it gets scary against a control player once they get kind of close, because once again, Aladdins can get you lore pretty much unexpectedly out of nowhere. So something to keep an eye out there.
Yeah, and I have to shout out, since we're talking about Aladdin, the man himself, Nicholas Cole, is actually in the chat watching. So shout out to Nicholas Cole for the awesome art. But yeah, like
Hello.
these Aladdins can be super scary for that reason. And even in that situation where he plays an Aladdin to take out another Aladdin, that might seem like, oh, that's not a great trade, right? Like you just traded cards. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was a 4 lore swing for Ssteadfast, who is already ahead in lore. He's at 15 lore right now against Walter's 9. And so like he's getting closer and closer to that 20 lore, putting even more and more pressure onto Walter. And like one of the things we see right now is we keep talking about card draw. Walter's main form of card draw right now is the Queen, but he has two Be Prepareds in hand, and he has a Maleficent and a Rafiki in hand. So if he's forced to play out a Be Prepared or something right now to get rid of Steadfast board, which we see the Maleficent go away immediately, and the Rafiki, so this doesn't really matter anymore. But with a full board like that, you don't really want to play a bunch of Be Prepared. So it kind of puts Walter in a weird situation if he's forced to use those as removal, since Steadfast is getting closer and closer to 20 lore.
Yeah, I'm one of the questions I do have to ask Steadfast is he seems to be really conservative about his use of Be Prepared, choosing to actually run two cards rather than a Be Prepared, where on that turn, once again, I would say like Be Prepared would have been pretty nice to run. So definitely some question I think one question I would have for him is potentially kind of his thought process about is he worried about things that Walter may have, and he wants to save those Be-Prepareds in case Walter plays out a lot of creatures like now, or is there another reason why he's saving the Be-Prepareds? Especially since in general, using one card to take out three of kind of your opponent's cards is always going to be pretty good value. But once again, we see Aladdin again from his Cauldron. So Cauldron lets him Steadfast take a look at the top two cards, and of course, Aladdin is going to go on top of his deck. And now that Steadfast has more creatures on the board, I wonder, yeah, like we see Steadfast start inking a lot some more cards. He still doesn't. You need quite a bit of ink in order to pull off. You need so Aladdin himself costs 7. The Pocket Watch requires 1 ink, so that's 8. And then using the shield requires another 3 ink. So you need 11 ink in order to attack into 2 targets with the Aladdin. And unfortunately, Ssteadfast just does not have enough ink to pull it off because he has 4 uninkable cards. Oh, and also the fact that Jetsam is evasive, so Aladdin can't attack into him anyways, which probably softens that sting a little bit. But imagine if Jetsam was not evasive and Ssteadfast had just 1 more ink. He could have challenged into the Maleficent, gain 2, challenged into the other card, and then be at 19 from nowhere. So that kind of just shows the relevant threat that Aladdin Pocket Watch combos have in this matchup.
Yeah, when I was just looking at that board state, we were talking about Steadfast being so conservative with his Be Prepareds. I'm sitting there and I'm like, he has 3 Be Prepareds in his hand. Steadfast has nothing on his side of the board. Walter has 3 other characters. Why isn't he playing a Be Prepared? And like that's why, because he drew the Aladdin, and Steadfast is playing to win right now. He's not playing to survive. He's in a great place in the game, and like we saw just how crazy that Aladdin was for him. He plays the Aladdin, takes a swing, now he's up at 17, Walter's back down at 12. I mean, Walter is just getting knocked down further and further and further. I don't even remember how many times Aladdin has attacked into Walter and knocked him down to lore already this game. And with those 2 cauldrons and the magic mirror on Steadfast side, I mean, we see another Aladdin right there that he's going to put right onto the top of his deck, and he can continue going with those pocket watches and shields, doing that over and over again every single time that Walter plays something and hopes to exert it. We also see a Mickey come down, which is a big threat. This is going to have to force either the Elsa or the Be Prepared out of Walter's hand. Or nope, he just top decks the Maleficent to get the Mickey out. But we're reaching the point of the game where Steadfast is pretty easily getting to the point where he's threatening a game win with most cards that he can play. So Walter's kind of on the back foot right now, having to respond to a lot of things instead of being able to go forward and put pressure on Steadfast himself.
Right, and now we can really see kind of the advantage of the consistent card draw from the mirror really coming into play. We can see now that Ssteadfast still has a bunch of cards in his hand, 5 cards. He can opt to draw more with his magic mirror, but then Walter only now has 4 cards and only 1 removal in the form of a Be Prepared. I also can tap down opponents' cards, but it doesn't actually kind of remove them. And so really the advantage is kind of, as this game has gone on and on longer and longer, the advantage to the Magic Mirror really kind of shows through. I've always been on Team Magic Mirror since it came out early, but I think it shines the most in kind of a slower pace control matchup, where honestly, like, this is part of the reason why I prefer to run like four magic mirrors in my deck, just so that I can draw into it a little bit easily, and always having more is just provides me a little bit more extra resources against my opponent. But in a aggro matchup, magic mirrors are not as good because they are very slow there, right? We just saw another Aladdin play from Ssteadfast, where he ran the Aladdin into Maleficent, and essentially that just brings Ssteadfast to 19. One more Aladdin play will seal the game for Ssteadfast, but I am going to utilize this cool new interface. Click on the discard and see how many Aladdin heroic outlaws are in the discard of Ssteadfast. We see one, oh,
I think
one,
there were 3.
2, 3, and then let me scroll up. Yeah, nope. So there is 3 in Steadfast discard, and I don't remember if he inked any. That it goes to show you sometimes remembering what opponents inked can be pretty important. So either Steadfast has one more Aladdin in his deck, or he doesn't have any. Which could definitely be a sigh of relief, because otherwise, if you think that your opponent has an Aladdin, you always kind of have a difficult time playing around that, kind of not have any exerted characters that he can run into. But we see at 19, it's just pretty difficult, because any threat that Steadfast plays has to be dealt with right now. But on the bright side, we see Steadfast's hand, and he has no characters in his hand. But now he has a Jafar. And so that's another character that needs to be taken care of.
So I'm not entirely sure this changes the game. It might have, because the points are looking pretty close at this point, but chat actually did a great job. They caught a misplay by Steadfast. You were mentioning earlier, Jay, that it takes 11 ink to play the Aladdin into Pocket Watch into Shield combo, and Steadfast only has 10 right now. And we saw earlier in the game he play that combo with the Aladdin into the Pocket Watch into the Shield.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how much that would have affected the total of this game, but
was
we
he not
definitely
able
want
to
to.
do okay.
Yeah, I don't think he was supposed to be able to do that. So we may want to remind the players in chat after this game that, to make sure to count their ink and do that kind of thing, because we want these games to be as fair as possible.
Fair enough. Yeah, I was so focused on kind of commentating and like analyzing the game that, like, right after I said something and then Steadfast made a play, and like we just assumed that was the right. Anyways, great catch. And like, oh wait, what happened? Why is Walter chatting? Hold on.
Yo, quick question.
Yep.
Nervous understand the rules, and also, what the heck was that opening hand? Anyway, so for freeze, can he shield a virtue and then quest, or for the deep freeze?
Let me.
Because on Pixelborn, I don't think it lets
you can't.
You cannot quest once you ready something with Shield of Virtue.
Shield of Virtue says it can't. They can't quest for the rest of this turn.
Also, Walter, we
So-
need to remind Steadfast. The Aladdin Heroic Outlaw into Pocket Watch into Shield Play cost 11 ink, not 10. And there was one point we missed it in the game.
Yeah.
There was one point where he played out that full combo and he only had 10 ink. So
Okay.
we might just need to remind him. And I don't know if you guys are in a voice chat or we can just type it to him in text.
I'll chat to him.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. But was that
Thank
kind
you.
of like a judge call there?
Well, for both of us, because we were like, wait, does this end the game or not? So,
Got it.
okay,
Yes.
cool. I will be back. I will talk to him.
Okay. Sounds good.
Much love. Bye.
Yeah. Bye. Okay. I will type in chat what we just said too, just so both players can know there. So
Yeah, for those of you that are watching in chat, basically Walter was asking if Steadfast could ready his Jafar after Elsa had exerted it, and if we read Elsa's text, Elsa says that you choose a character and exert them, and then they don't ready their next ready step. So Walter chose Jafar, who gets exerted. Then when it comes to Steadfast's turn, Steadfast doesn't get to ready Jafar. So he can't quest with Jafar, meaning that Steadfast can't win that turn. And then the question was, can they use Shield of Virtue to ready Jafar since he was exerted by Elsa, and then quest? And then we can see on the card text that Shield of Virtue specifically states that you can use it to ready a card, but once that card is readied with Shield of Virtue, you cannot quest with that card.
Yep. But having said that, another really interesting interaction that I've succumbed to before is it doesn't prevent Aladdin from being re-readied and attacking in order to gain you the lore. So that's another kind of interesting scenario where the shield of, like, if you use Elsa on an opponent's Aladdin, they absolutely can re-ready that Aladdin with a shield and then attack into something you have in order to gain lore that way. So
yeah, I think we've definitely seen just how powerful Aladdin Heroic Outlaw can be in games like this, even when he only makes the one trade. You know, that's one thing that I've seen a lot of people, it's a mistake they make when they evaluate the card. They see the card, they see his ability, and then they say, oh, you know, but I don't know that gaining 2 lore after casting a character and then challenging and losing it is all that special. But I mean, it's a 4 lore swing, and we can see Steadfast has done that 3 times this game, which means that's a total of 12 lore. Steadfast has manipulated at least 12 lore in this game just by playing Aladdin's and challenging and banishing stuff with that, which over the long term of a game like this, especially a control matchup, is super, super, super hard to make up. Imagine
Definitely.
Instead of having to only get 20 lore, you have to get 32 lore. I mean, that's an entirely different game at that point.
Yeah, and I would also say not only does it make slows down your opponent and kind of reduces your progress, but one of the other benefits of having done so is it gives like control players a little bit more breathing space. And I keep on saying that breathing space, and essentially what I mean is that if your opponent's far enough away from winning the game at 20 lore, generally as a control player you can draw cards or like refill your resources, and that's a great thing of being able to play out your friends on the other side or use your mirrors in order to kind of get ready for the second onslaught or the next onslaught from your opponent. And so Aladdin does a great job too of like kind of giving you that breathing room and space there. But I think we have seen that there was just a little bit too much resources on Ssteadfast, and so he does take game 1, and Walter loses game 1 there, and on to game 2.
So I'm noticing in the chat there, Steadfast said, we will restart the best of 3. Let us know if we make a blunder. So it looks like that because of that misplay, Steadfast is deciding that he doesn't want an unfair game. He doesn't want to win unfairly. They were a little bit too far progressed in their game state to backtrack everything. So they're just going to redo game 1. So for those of you who don't know, this is a best of 3. Whoever wins the 2 matches first wins the finals essentially. So good on Steadfast for giving Walter that the fairness of redoing best of one. All that I can say to the viewers, go grab some popcorn, go grab your favorite snack, go grab your favorite drink. These control matchups can be a little long, and it looks like, I mean, there could potentially be 3 more. So I hope you guys are ready. I know I'm excited. We've waited a month for this essentially to get to the finals here. And so we're just going to go straight into game 3. It looks like Walter is planning to mulligan 3 cards. And Steadfast is deciding right now what he wants to mulligan. Something that I wanted to mention.
Go
ahead.
Brandon, you mentioned, are we getting into game 3 or just restarting game 1? I just wanted to.
I think they're just restarting game 1. I think the way I understood it is Steadfast just said they're going to restart the whole series, so that Steadfast doesn't win, because of illegal play.
Sounds great.
One thing that I wanted to mention that I thought was interesting about last game, even though it doesn't count, is Steadfast only runs 2 Magic Mirrors, 2 Ursula's Cauldrons, and 2 Pocket Watches. And granted, I looked before the game ended, and Steadfast had gone through a large majority of his deck. I think he only had 20 cards left. But he had 2 Ursula's Cauldrons. He also only runs 2 Shield of Virtues. He had 2 Ursula's Cauldrons, 1 Magic Mirror, 1 Pocket Watch, and 1 Shield all out on the board. So that was some pretty crazy draws, and we saw the Magic Mirror come down really early last game, and the Ursula's Cauldron, which gave Steadfast a really great advantage into Walter, because here's one of the things. Walter doesn't run Magic Mirror like we've mentioned before. The closest thing he runs to it is a Queen, but he was able to draw into his Maleficents, into his friends on the other sides, and he was able to actually draw a little bit faster than Steadfast was. So it'll be interesting to see here if Steadfast can't find those items as quickly, if Walter can take the lead a little bit faster, and maybe instead of being on the back foot and having to be reactive to Steadfast, if instead he can sort of assert his dominance and he can go on the offensive and start questing and maybe take this out from Steadfast for game 1.
Definitely. It might end up being a matter of, let's see if Steadfast is able to draw into his Ursula's Cauldrons or the Magic Mirror. I think if he doesn't get them super fast, the game is a lot more closer of a toss-up between the 2 players. Once again, we see Steadfast run or actually we've seen both players really play befuddles on their opponent's character. And I would say, in general, in my experience playing kind of the control matchup, befuddle is really a card that doesn't make too much of an impact if you play it to return the card to your opponent's hand. And it might just have been better if Steadfast used Befuddle as an ink, right? Because essentially when Ssteadfast played a Befuddle on the Gaston, Walter was able to go right ahead and put that Gaston into his ink, essentially netting him some additional cards in his hand. And so we see like now that Walter has 1 or 2 more cards in his hand than Ssteadfast, but like in the long run, 1 or 2 cards isn't gonna make too much of a difference, but it adds up, right? So I'm wondering if the players, as they kind of get a little bit more experience in this matchup, realize that the befuddles, you really don't need to use them on your opponent, especially since it's so, I guess, the pace of these games are so slow. Befuddle really is one of those cards you include against the aggro matchup, right? So for example, if an opponent is questing with the Lilo and has a Simba on the board, you can befuddle and bounce back their bodyguard characters. Always ink it rather than, I guess, playing it or discarding it out. So interesting, consistent kind of quirks that I've seen where both players have really not potentially been using befuddles in the most optimal way. But I wonder, part of it is because maybe the mirror matchup is so different than how you're normally used to playing as the control deck. Because normally as a control like Amethyst Ruby, you're just thinking about survival. You're thinking about how do I prevent my opponent from getting to 20 lore. But once you see a kind of control mirror, you need to kind of like completely shift that paradigm into thinking, okay, how am I going to outlast my opponent and really use every kind of ounce of my cards to their fullest value there. And it's the toughest, most like stamina draining matchups because we keep on harping they take a long time. I'm just looking at the clock right now, and it's already been almost 50 minutes, and it just reminds me kind of funnily that most matches have a 50-minute, like at least official matches for tournament play probably have around a 50-minute timer, and so essentially that just ended up being one game. So it might really be interesting to see how things play out in the competitive scene when there is a timer. And part of this reason is I'm really glad we don't have a timer, because it really allows us to show both players playing kind of the most optimal way what their deck is trying to do without having to worry about those extra kind of considerations like how much time do I have left, if there's any tiebreak rules or that sort of stuff there.
Yeah, this is a topic that's been coming up more and more recently in the community, mainly because Ruby Amethyst is just a really strong deck. I mean, I'm going to say it's arguably the strongest deck that is in the quote unquote meta right now. But that's exactly its downfall. It takes a long time to pilot, and even people that are really good at playing the deck. I mean, this is a finals match. These guys know at least a little bit of what they're doing. Takes a long time, especially when it's a mirror match. And just like you said, typically in tournament play, it's usually a best of 3 50-minute rounds. So I'm interested to see how well this deck actually performs in tournaments like that, where you are on a time crunch. You don't have as much time to make decisions on what you have to ink, what you don't. One of the things that I love the most about this game is all of the micro decisions that you have to make that affect the game in the long term. I learned the hard lesson once, and Jared from Citizens of Lorcana might laugh at me for this. I remember a game that I was playing. I was playing Sapphire and something else, and I was basically ahead. I had kind of taken control of the board, but I didn't have anything in my hand because I think I was playing Sapphire Steel, so there's not a lot of draw in those colors. And I drew a flounder. I think this was in the starter deck challenge. And I said, you know what? I'm going to hold this flounder. I'm at 7 ink. If I draw the Maui next turn, I'm going to really regret playing this flounder, which was not the smart decision for me. I had probably 40 cards in my deck left. The likelihood of me seeing the Maui was minimal. I should have just played it, because I ended up losing that game 19-20 because I didn't play the flounder and couldn't have quested with the flounder. And so one of the things that I love about this game are those micro decisions that really do make the difference in the game. And when you have these control matchups where you have to think really hard about what cards you're inking and what cards you aren't, what cards you're using to remove. Do you use the Maleficent or do you use the Be Prepared? Those can make or break the whether or not you win the game. And when you're crunched for time, people usually make mistakes. So it's really I'm very interested to see how optimal this deck is to run in a best of 3 50-minute format, and it's really going to test how good and how comfortable people are with this deck, because they're not going to have the time to analyze every single one of those possibilities that you might, especially into the control mirror.
Definitely. So I'm also I just saw a quick message from Ssteadfast that it is a little bit laggy from his side of things, and probably me being the host, it's as this match goes on and my computer is just heating up more, running this off of a laptop. So hopefully we'll see it won't be too bad, but if it becomes an issue, I may end up having to kind of just close down some things. We'll definitely keep the stream going, but just something to keep an eye on there. But in the meanwhile, This game, it's night and day compared to the last game. Taking a look, Steadfast does not have the mirror, the magic mirror, and just like has definitely a lot fewer resources. He's forced to ink a pocket watch, which he probably doesn't want to. But yeah, you can definitely see kind of that difference there of having the pocket watch versus not having a pocket watch. Sorry, magic mirror versus not having a magic mirror in this game. And so right now, I would say just look at the number of cards in Walter's hand right now. Definitely a advantage to him.
Yeah, and one of the good things about the way that Walter is running his draw engines in his deck, not using Magic Mirror, is he's able to get characters out on board while he's drawing cards. So he's playing these Maleficent Sorcerers. He can sing with them, or he can sing Friends on the Other Side with Maleficent Sorcerers to draw even more cards. Even when he plays Queen, that's another character on board. So when he's faced with a board state like this, where Steadfast doesn't have anything on the other side of the board, he's just able to draw. He's gaining tempo in the sense of he's drawing cards and he's putting characters on board so that he can continue to quest. And I mean, Walter has a huge hand right now. He has basically every answer that he could think of. He's all the way up to 7 ink. I'll be interested to see what he decides to ink. Like we talked about before, having a lot of ink in these control matchups is usually really powerful so that you can play multiple things in a turn. But yeah.
As I was just saying that being a bit concerned, Ssteadfast did draw into his Ursula's Cauldron. Probably would have wanted the Magic Mirror, but Cauldron is much better than nothing, and so I bet Ssteadfast is definitely happy about drawing into that Cauldron. And it just essentially allows him to dig through his large 64 card deck a little bit faster, trying to find that magic mirror. So right now, I think Steadfast is a little bit on the kind of on the back foot there, trying to refill his hand. And if Walter is kind of it notices this, he's probably gonna try to push and try to get as much lore as he can, and hopefully be able to win there. We see the magic mirror come into hand. The question is, does Steadfast have enough ink to play he has 8, so he has at least enough ink to play the magic mirror on top of a Be Prepared. I do think he needs does he need to? Opponent will be at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so 19. I don't think that's something that Ssteadfast wants to deal with. So yeah, this Be Prepared is coming down. And he play out the magic mirror. Interesting. That makes sense, I guess, because he wants to save the Maleficent for a threat. Like for example, we see Mickey Mouse in Walter's hand. Yeah, so that Maleficent, holding the Maleficent in his hand, is going to come in clutch this next turn. Or he drew another uninkable. Yeah, I was about to say, I kind of just assumed that Ssteadfast was going to draw something inkable because he has a filter from the Cauldron. But no, Elsa is good enough. So Elsa can prevent Mickey from questing. And we did see that the Cauldron put an inkable on top of Ssteadfast's deck next turn. So I wonder what, Walter is going to run. Okay. So Walter has so much removal and gas in his deck right now. But that Maleficent probably has to come down in order to deal with the Mickey.
Yeah, I can't imagine you want that Mickey to stay there. Like you've got to start answering some of these for that. The reason you mentioned earlier, exactly that was. I'm glad that he kept the Maleficent in hand because he knows that Walter runs a couple Mickeys. Walter actually runs it looks like he runs 4 of the evasive Mickeys, and he's at a lore count right now where he only needs 2 turns that he can quest 4 lore with a Mickey in order to win,
Yeah.
which might not sound like a lot in a game where there's a lot of removal, but when Steadfast doesn't have a bunch of cards in hand and he doesn't have a great way to draw cards, luckily he has the
Yep.
Cauldron and the mirror right now, so he can
Yeah.
filter through a lot and try to draw into a lot. But
Yep.
Steadfast is extremely low on resources right now to deal with Walter's stuff, and like before too long, unless he draws a Be Prepared or or something to get rid of these characters, Walter even only having 2 characters out on board right now is kind of a threat, because I don't think Steadfast has a way to deal with multiple characters at once. He can play this Maui to run into it, but next turn,
Yeah.
Walter's just going to be able to quest with this Maleficent and gain 2 more lore, going up to 16. So Walter's
Yeah.
getting to a dangerous spot where having multiple things on board and Steadfast not being able to deal with all of it at once. I mean, Steadfast has got to be looking for top decks for sure.
Definitely. I think the next 3 or 4 turns is going to be key. Whether or not Steadfast is able to find a breathing space. Oh, so Walter does run some cauldrons. He doesn't run magic mirrors, but at least the cauldrons can help him filter out for what's important in his deck. But the next 3 or 4 turns is really going to determine if Steadfast can stabilize and get some more gas in his hand through that magic mirror, or if he just isn't able to deal with Walter's board state and Walter is able to quest out. So these top decks and the magic mirror is going to be so important right now. That's some decent card draw. But unfortunately, oh, well, I guess, so Walter does not run any shields or ways to unexert his character. So I was about to say, playing out that Aladdin can be really risky if Walter had a way to unexert Aladdin, because he can quest with Aladdin, unexert it, tap down his opponent's Aladdin with Elsa, and then essentially get 4 lore off of the Aladdin. Plus the 2 from the Maleficent would give him a way to win, but Walter doesn't have a way to unexert Aladdin, so that's a pretty moot point. Regardless, having played the Aladdin and got to use the mirror, I thought Steadfast might have had enough ink to play out the friends on the other side as well, but looks like he was just 1 shy away. Would have been a great way for him to refill his hand. So right now, Walter is gonna be at 19 after this turn. And so it turns out that 1 lore from the Aladdin may have made a difference. But it's still, Walter is on the verge of winning, and realistically, the only thing I can see that would save Steadfast is a Be Prepared. He's only played 1. He probably runs 4, which means that he gets quite a few looks at his deck in order to get a Be Prepared. So I wonder if he is going to be able to top deck it or pull it. Also,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I think this is do or die for Steadfast, just like you said. If we don't see the Be Prepared, I can't think of anything that saves him from this game.
Yep, and neither of those are Be Prepareds. I think what Steadfast is gonna have to do is play out the friends on the other side and draw 2, and hopefully we know one of them is Gaston. I mean,
No, he just scoops. He doesn't even look for it. All right, well,
right.
that
game
is
1.
so crazy.
Yeah.
That's game 1, seeing the night and day. Without that misplay, Steadfast has game 1. They replay it. Great sportsmanship by Steadfast, by the way. We love to see it.
Yep.
But just night and day. When you don't draw those magic mirrors early enough and you don't draw those cauldrons, we saw Walter got ahead really quickly, playing the things like Mickey with a lot of lore that are hard to deal with, and Steadfast just not being able to draw into all the answers like he did in game 1, gave Walter the advantage. So now instead of Steadfast being up, Walter's up, and what was actually a relatively quick game. I think that game was only like 15 minutes long compared to the other one, which was like 40 minutes long. So obviously draw is going to be key to these games, and we see a magic mirror in Steadfast hand. I'm sure he wants to keep that so that he can filter things out this game, especially since he only runs 2, like we said. And last game we saw he had to ink a pocket watch as well, which he only runs 2 of. So I'm sure he doesn't want to ink any of the items that he doesn't have to. But he should have a more consistent time this game and actually drawing cards and keeping up with Walter. So we'll see if Walter can squeak past with another win and take the finals, or if we're gonna go to a game 3.
Yep. Definitely kind of seeing that magic mirror in the opening hand is gonna make a huge amount of difference here. Going into game 2. And we'll see. I think one of the not very harped on things about kind of playing the Amethyst Ruby deck is also like and you had mentioned a little bit before, Brandon, about like there's so many nuances about kind of the plays that you choose to do, and how when you play something on turn 2 or ink something on turn 2, it may have a lot of influence on the game, like later down on turn 8 or 9 or later on in the game. For example, if you ink something that you really want to play later on, that really kind of makes a difference, right? And so there's just so much decision making in piloting this deck, and part of like what I keep on hearing a lot about Lorcana is, it's a much simpler game. Like, you can't interact on your opponent's turn. You can only do things on your side of the board, and that sort of stuff. But really, there is a lot of kind of decision making and strategy to really separate out players based off of skill level there. And so I think that's one of the really cool things that, like, kind of early on, a lot of as players were worried, wait, is it gonna be just like a simple like card game that's super easy and doesn't have kind of that richness of strategy? But very clearly we see, like, in this matchup, there is so much strategy and decision making to be made each turn here. So
Yeah, we see. I mean, you're exactly right. There are so many micro decisions about this game. It affects everything. We see Walter playing out a pretty wide board, all things considered, in a control matchup with 2 Sergeant Tibbs. I don't think we've seen them being played in this series yet, and a Maleficent Sorcerer. We see so much draw in the first part of the game from both players. We've got the Magic Mirrors, we've got the Maleficent Sorcerers. There's some friends on the other sides in hand. Walter has a queen in hand as well. So this is going to be a very both players are going to have to grind to win this game, I think, because they're both just going to be drawing into more and more resources. We see Ssteadfast draw 2 pocket watches here, so he's safe to ink one, knowing that he can play another, and he has the Aladdin in hand as well. And again, he has that ability to play the Aladdin and the pocket watch to give it rush later on in the game, which, we saw how powerful that was in the first game that they ended up having to replay, where I want to say Ssteadfast had at least swung 12 lore.
yeah.
And we can see where Walter can get ahead and he can get to 20 really quickly. His version of this Ruby Amethyst deck does really well. But when he's pressured, when things are getting banished over and over again, and when lore is continually being stolen, it's really difficult for him to keep up because he's lacking things like Magic Mirror. So Ssteadfast is looking pretty good on this one, especially with 7 cards in hand. He's got a couple removal pieces with the Maleficent and the Dragonfire, I believe, that's in hand. So, and right now, Walter has 2 Dragonfires, but that's pretty much it. Other than that, he has Aladdins, which he doesn't. I don't think he runs a pocket watch. No, he doesn't run any pocket watches. So those Aladdins would just have to sit on board for a minute, which are prime targets for something like a Dragonfire or a Maleficent. And he has a Jetsam, which has evasive, and evasive can be great, but it's only 1 lore per turn, and usually gets taken out by something like a Be Prepared, or Ssteadfast can easily just play a Maleficent Monstrous Dragon to stay ahead and banish it. We see the shield come down as well, which is going to be able to ready Ssteadfast characters, and all that's going to do basically is that's going to help him with that Aladdin combo. Not only is it going to help him with the Aladdin combo, but it's going to allow him to quest with a character or sing with a character or even challenge with a character and then ready them back up and make it so that it's difficult for Walter to interact. That's one of the really strong things about Shield of Virtue is in Lorcana, there's a lot of back and forth that gets played. I like to tell new players and players that want to get better, one of the best indicators of how you're doing in your match is, are you playing your opponent's game or are they playing yours? Because if you're questing and you're forcing your opponent to have to deal with your stuff and you're keeping the pressure on, you're in a good place. But if you're having to respond to a bunch of stuff to your opponent, you're not really in a place where you can, or I guess when you're having to play really reactively, that's not usually very good. And Shield basically lets you play your own game. You can challenge stuff and then ready your characters, or you can quest and ready your characters, and it makes it so much more difficult for your opponent to deal with you. And really, one of the only ways to get around it is to race them down or force them to make really difficult trades. It means that analyzing the board that we talked about before, those micro decisions where you're having to decide, okay, well, if I quest with this, then my opponent can do X, Y, and Z. Having to think those lines out takes up time, takes up brain space. So Ssteadfast is looking really good with these items on board.
Yeah.
Walter doesn't have any way to get rid of the items. We talked about the befuddles before, but we talked about how they just aren't super great in this matchup. And one of the interesting things about an item is the item doesn't have to dry. So when you play a character, its ink has to dry before it can challenge or it can quest. An item doesn't have to do that. The turn that you play an item, you can use that item. So if Walter uses any befuddles that he might have left to bounce an item back to Steadfast's hand, it really doesn't do anything other than force Steadfast to have to pay for the item again the next turn. So just like game one, the more items that we see come out into the board, the scarier this kind of gets for Walter, because that's just more resources and more value that Steadfast is able to generate by drawing cards, readying his characters to prepare for the next rounds, and so forth.
Yeah. So we just saw Ssteadfast ink his second pocket watch, and I wonder if he felt the pressure in order to kind of get to Aladdin, and also if he feels like because he has a small Aladdin on board, he could technically shift onto him. But I wonder if he'll come back to kind of bite him, or if he would have kind of wanted to keep that pocket watch there, because now essentially Walter at least doesn't have to deal with that pocket watch Aladdin combo. The Aladdin will still come down, but it's a lot less threatening once you can see an Aladdin on the board to deal with your removals or tapping it down or exerting him down with the Elsas and so forth. But having said that, though, Steadfast is still very much in a pretty good place, because now, as we see, he still has some removal in the form of Maleficents and Dragonfires, and notably has that magic mirror down. So there's definitely always some give and take there, but I think not having to deal with having a pocket watch from Steadfast's side of the board is definitely a something that Walter is really happy to know about.
Yeah, and once these players made it out of Swiss and made it into top 8, for those of you that don't know, the deck lists were revealed. So the top 8 players all could look at each other's deck lists. They may have each other's deck lists open right now. And so like if Walter has looked at Steadfast deck list, Walter will know that Steadfast only runs 2 pocket watches. And, if he's paying attention to what he's put into his inkwell, he'll know that Steadfast has 2 pocket watches in his inkwell. So he doesn't have to worry about that Aladdin anymore. He can pretty safely quest with characters, knowing that there's not anything that Steadfast is going to be able to play and immediately attack into it, other than something like a Rafiki. But that's not the craziest thing. You're more concerned about that Aladdin coming down and taking a 4-lore swing, potentially a favorable trade as well, so that Steadfast Aladdin stays alive and then can swing and do another 4-lore swing. So I'm very surprised that Ssteadfast puts the pocket watch into his ink, especially knowing that Walter's deck in this mirror match is the one that's a little bit more aggressive, in the sense that he's trying to quest a little bit harder. He doesn't have as many ways to control the opponent's board. And if I were Steadfast, I definitely would have considered playing the pocket watch instead, holding those Aladdins, knowing that Walter's only at 11 lore. You're not too worried about him right now. He's not dangerously close to 20, even if something like a Mickey Mouse comes down. especially since you have like an Elsa in hand that you can use to exert the Mickey Mouse down to. That's definitely going to be something I'll ask him in the post game is why he decided to ink that second pocket watch.
Definitely. But I do think that Steadfast is just looking at the state of the board and the hands and the game. I think Steadfast is fairly comfortable right now with how things are going. He has as long as he can safely generate value off of that magic mirror, it's gonna be a rough road once again for Walter. As we see that Maui just come down, it's gonna hit like a truck. Essentially take out the Aladdin on the turn because Maui has rush, so it can attack immediately when it comes down. And yeah, I think this is definitely while Steadfast isn't going to be as high up on lore compared to Walter. I think he has a pretty good grasp on the state of this particular game.
Yeah, and one thing that we've seen with specifically this Ruby Amethyst control decks is it's okay if they don't have a lot of lore for most of the game, because once they take control and get into that late game, they gain lore really quickly between the Elsas and the Mickey Mouse BLTs and things like that. It does not take very many turns for this Ruby Amethyst player, once they have control of the board and they've exhausted the resources and cards in hand for their opponent, to just play a bunch of cards out on field and win the game in like 3 turns.
Yep. Another less kind of harped upon strategy with the pocket watch there is a lot of times I really like playing the Maleficent when an opponent had like a quest with the character and then plays out another character. You can essentially use the Maleficent to take out the unexerted character and use pocket watch to give the Maleficent rush to take out the exerted character. And getting a 2-for-1 immediately with Maleficent just is always so nice, especially because in the mirror, a lot of times you end up playing a Maleficent and then your opponent plays a Maleficent on your Maleficent, and you essentially bounce Maleficents back and forth. Getting a little bit of extra value with the pocket watch can be a strategy for everyone listening there. But there is no pocket watch, so that's a moot point. Elsa is able to exert both characters and essentially take out Aladdin. So right now, really kind of taking a look at the state of kind of the board, Walter does have a Elsa in hand that could potentially quest for 3. So that's gonna be a bit scary for Ssteadfast, who doesn't have any immediate removals left in his hand now. But he does have 2 draws every single turn off of the magic mirror. So that's always gonna be a tough hurdle for Walter to kind of climb over there.
Yeah, I think if I'm Walter right now, I'm just kind of praying that Steadfast doesn't have any hard removal in his hand right now. And then potentially, yeah, like he's having to decide when does he play the Elsa and try to get as close to 18 as he can. With every turn that goes by, Steadfast is drawing 2 cards, which just gives him, that puts him closer and closer to a removal card if he doesn't have one. So I see it's really interesting that he plays the Maui. It looks like I guess that's to prevent the Elsa from questing this turn, and if she does, then he can take him out with the Maui. But I'm a little bit surprised that Walter doesn't just try to race Steadfast at this point, kind of realizing that he doesn't have many cards in hand. I don't know how many card draw cards he has so far.
I was just about to say that was a bold move by Steadfast to not use a magic mirror. Knowing you don't have any removal in hand. As a control player, I feel like I always want to have removal in my hand. If I don't, like, that's the first step. No matter what, like, kind of the board state, your opponent can always play out something that could be threatening. So I feel like I feel like not having any removal is risky.
Yeah, and I mean, we see it here. He doesn't draw into the removal this turn. He's going to have to draw with the magic mirror. He does find a friends on the other side, but unfortunately, if he wants to draw any more cards, he's going to have to pay 3 ink for it. And at that point, that puts him with only 4 lore left to work with. I don't think he's inked this turn, so he could still ink a card. And he'd basically be looking for a Dragonfire. But otherwise, Elsa's going to be able to quest next turn, putting Walter at 18, which is a scary place for Ssteadfast because then it starts getting to that point where if Ssteadfast doesn't have those hard removal answers and Walter is able to play something that has 2 lore and he can't do anything about it, Walter ends up winning that. And we see that Ssteadfast doesn't draw a hard removal piece. So luckily for Ssteadfast, Walter does not have a 2 lore character in hand right now. He might draw into one. Okay, so there we see a Be Prepared. We know that he at least has that on the top of his deck.
Saved by the Cauldron, right?
Yeah, exactly. That Cauldron and Magic Mirror is just an unbelievable combo for that reason exactly. You get to filter through so much of your deck.
So much,
and you get to take those risky plays where you're like, I can look at the next 3 cards in my deck and, just kind of hope that you can find a removal piece. So luckily Ssteadfast is going to be saved in that sense. We do see Ssteadfast play the Aladdin Street Rat. When Aladdin Street Rat is played, Walter loses 1 lore, so that's going to take him a little bit further away from his win condition. But again, Walter plays 2 Ursulas, he plays 4 Mickey Mouse BLTs, he plays 4 Elsas, and all of those have 3 lore or more. And so there's still plenty of options for Walter to draw into and things for him to just play onto the board. And if Ssteadfast doesn't have the hard removal answer, then Walter could win the next turn.
Definitely. Actually, though, I'm wondering. Technically, Ssteadfast he can even save the Be Prepared. Because if he just runs the Mickey and the Aladdin into the Elsa, it's enough to at least prevent a win next turn. Or he has a Maui. So I think likely what we're going to see is the Maui come down to run into the Elsa and then some more card draw. Because Ssteadfast needs to draw into... okay. So he does use the Be Prepared, I guess. But he can sing it with the Mickey. So that's really nice because now he has additional ink to kind of draw. I guess the reason why I had thought about... saving the Be Prepared is because if you don't need to play it, then you can save it for a little bit more of a dire situation, right? And now we just see on the other side, Walter not drawing the most relevant cards immediately when he needs to. Essentially, Walter clearly needs that Elsa. If he had drawn that Elsa instead of the Gaston last turn, that would have immediately been slammed down. Tapped the opponent's Elsa, and really forced his opponent to have to kind of find an answer. But now Ssteadfast gets a bunch of his answers. I think he should be sighing a little bit in relief now. But I was just thinking, what Ssteadfast can also do is he does have the shield, which gives him the option of if your opponent plays an Elsa to tap down your Elsa, you can shield, re-ready your Elsa, and use Elsa's ability. It's not questing, so we can use Elsa's ability to tap down the Elsa that your opponent just played, and then run the Maui into it. So there's a lot of options for a control player. There we see, I'm not too sure necessarily why a Ssteadfast shifted and played out his Elsa. He wants to race, I guess. He wants to get more or wants to get more lore quickly. And so that's why he shifted with Elsa. One thing to note in this game particularly is that Ssteadfast has fewer cards than Walter in his deck. So right now Ssteadfast is at 28 cards and Walter is at 33 cards. But even then, I would say that knowing that Walter doesn't play any Magic Mirrors, I feel like Ssteadfast should have enough resources that honestly I would have just kept that Elsa for in case it's needed. Great top deck in the Maleficent, but you really don't want to be in these top deck situations, right? And I think once Steadfast has enough time to stabilize, get the cards into his hand that he needs, and then worry about questing out. But I guess right now, Maleficent is a great card to top deck. Remove that Elsa. And Walter is probably hoping to kind of draw another Elsa if he has any more. Or a
Yeah.
Mickey or something, yeah.
Yeah, I think Walter's just looking for any of
Oh,
those
there's
high lore
another, yeah.
characters. Yeah, see, there's
Yeah.
another Elsa. Gosh, how many has that been from Walter at this point? That's at least two, probably three or four. But yeah, if I'm Walter, I'm just hoping that I draw any of those high lore characters, trying to put the pressure onto Steadfast. It is an extremely difficult
It's
place because Walter only has 8 ink, so he doesn't really have the luxury of waiting and holding cards in hand and being able to play like two cards at the same time in order to really pressure your opponent to have a bunch of answers. So Walter's basically just in this point right now where he's playing a card and then just kind of hoping that Steadfast doesn't have the answer to it. And now that Steadfast shifted his Elsa, I think it's Spirit of Winter. Yeah, Elsa Spirit of Winter on top of the Elsa Snow Queen. Steadfast no longer has the option to exert a character using Elsa Snow Queen and then using Maui to take it out. So now Steadfast is back in that situation where he has to draw a removal piece. Granted, he can filter two cards with Cauldron.
He also
and
has
he
to be
can still
prepared.
draw.
Yeah, he has to be prepared on top of his deck though. So
Oh, does he? I missed that. Okay.
from the last Cauldron. So he's at least safe there. But really, I feel like potentially like uh, keeping the Elsa, the 3-cost Elsa may have been really good synergy with the shield. Yeah, I feel like part of what was I gonna say? Yeah, an unexpected outcome. Normally, like when we see these control mirrors, we're talking about Elsa, like the big Elsa, the 8-cost Elsa that really quests for 3 and can tap down your opponent immediately. But sometimes that small Elsa, the 3-cost that can each turn exert herself to tap down an opponent, that can come in clutch in some really unique situations. And I just remember early on in Lorcana, before we have had all of the spoilers or all of the cards revealed, Elsa the 3-cost used to be an MVP, just because it was the only card that can immediately exert, or sorry, it was the only card that could interact with your opponent's board and exert a character. So I'm glad that like Elsa, the 3-cost Elsa has kind of come into the light a little bit, especially in the mirror match. And there we also the very last Elsa Spirit of Winter from Walter's deck, which is actually pretty impressive because he's only gone through about half of his deck and he has all 4 Elsas. Granted, now he has filtered a lot with the Ursula's Cauldron, but that's probably really beneficial having seen 4 Elsas there.
Yeah, I mean that real, you're happy as Steadfast to see as many of those go into the discard as possible because, like I said, Walter runs a lot of high lore characters, but once all 4 of those Elsas are gone, there's only 4 Mickey BLTs and there's 2 Ursulas.
We might
Yeah.
Well, I was also we might see the Elsa Exert play that we were talking about. So.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Okay, so this is going to be interesting. This is a great combo, as Jay mentioned earlier, using the Shield of Virtue to ready your Elsa. And she can't quest, but she can exert. And then, yeah, we see Steadfast drawn to another Maui. Especially in these control matchups, it's fun to use these Mauis whenever you can. Take out something that's exerted because that's one less thing you have to take out with a hard removal piece like Maleficent or a Dragonfire. So I'm sure that's exactly what we'll see here.
Yep. Yeah, that is certainly really helpful. Buys Steadfast a little bit of time. Once again, though, Steadfast is a little bit on the back foot of I wonder how much like relevant cards he has. I'm just gonna take a quick look at Steadfast's discard. He's played only one Elsa Spirit of Winter, so I guess he has a lot of Elsa Spirit of Winters left to draw into, which is good for him. He has played three Be Prepared, so he only has one more Be Prepared in his deck. How about Maleficent Monsters Dragons? He has played two of them. And then he has played does he have any more Aladdins in his deck? Oh, and we see a Be Prepared come down from Walter there. I think he has he's played out two, or at least inked and played out an Aladdin. So I think he probably has two more Aladdins in his deck. And there so I think Steadfast now having more Elsas in his deck to draw into can be really helpful. And the small Aladdins are doing a really good work at just consistently removing one lore at a time from his opponent, which I'm sure has to be pretty annoying for if you're playing on Walter's side of the board.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, even other than just the big Elsa, I'm really happy to see that Aladdin Street Rat, because as soon as you play that and Walter goes down to 16, now other than a Mickey, there's not a single card that Walter can draw that you have to take care of immediately. You'll get at least an extra turn to deal with something, and like just a little bit too late, he draws one of his two Ursulas. He's able to draw a card with Ursula, but Ursula would have threatened winning the game with that 3 lore had the Aladdin Street Rat not come down. Obviously, we see that there's a Dragonfire in Steadfast hand anyway, so he would have a way to deal with it. But you know, as for Walter, you definitely don't like seeing those Street Rats, and I don't know how many more Aladdin Street Rats Steadfast has in his deck. I know he runs 4 of them, but every single time that Walter has cut back a little bit of lore, it's kind of like we mentioned at the beginning of this game, like that. That's going to make a big difference, having to force Walter to make up lore, since he's a deck that doesn't do as much controlling and does a lot more of being explosive and playing big characters and trying to get those quests out.
Yeah. And once again, I really do think just can't harp enough on the importance of the magic mirror there. And once again, I'm just surprised that Steadfast chose to re-ready his Aladdin rather than to draw an extra card. I wonder if he is worried about decking out at this point, but I would say that like uh having more cards in hand and resources is a little bit more important at this stage of the game than being worried about running out of cards in your deck. But having said that, I think this is one of the reasons I have to mention the players built their decks a couple of weeks ago, and so that like the meta has been very different between when our players made their decks versus now. And I think this is a perfect example of how like we start to see cards like Groom start going into these control decks, just because of kind of you never want to be super worried about not having enough cards in your deck, and Brooms is a great way to like kind of restock your deck by adding a card back from your discard pile back into a deck. And it can also be like add like those useful cards, the Elsas that got removed, or like the Maleficent Monsters Dragons and so forth. And so as like kind of one thing kind of to note here is these games kind of really showcase some of the kind of current things that are happening with Lorcana currently, and how like different decks have evolved. But we do know that neither player runs Brooms, and so the number of cards in the deck is essentially a hard turn count. So at the very most, this game will only last for 17 more turns for Steadfast, unless or if Steadfast uses the magic mirror to draw more cards, it'll end up ending even sooner. So it's essentially a kind of race against the clock now. So will Steadfast be able to have enough resources to both deal with Walter's side of the board and get the remaining 6 lore that he needs? And so I think that these next couple of draws is going to be super important. So nothing particularly good from Steadfast. I think that probably his best play is just going to play out the Elsa and then Quest for 3, bringing him up to 17. We do see a Be Prepared from Walter's side of the board, which is going to really kind of reset the state of things. Steadfast doesn't have any characters in his hand that can quest, so yeah, I think he's going to rely on drawing. I think he has at least 1, if not 2 more Elsa Spirit of Winters there. But yep, we'll see the Be Prepared come down. Oh, another Mickey. That's going to be really nice from Walter's side. So it's going to come down to the wire. Honestly, before I think I had given the advantage to Steadfast, but now I think it's really a very close game.
Yeah, I was gonna say that Elsa Spirit of Winter was pretty killer for Walter there because he had the Be Prepared in hand and Steadfast was threatening to win the next turn. And we were essentially at a spot where Walter had 4 lore on board with the Mickey Mouse. And if Steadfast didn't have the Elsa or something to prevent Mickey from questing that next turn, then Walter would have won. But since he was able to play the Elsa, now
and the
Steadfast
Mickey,
had the full board. Yeah, so now Steadfast has a Mickey and a Dragonfire.
I think that does it because we know the top deck is a Mickey and Walter has nothing to deal with the Mickey. So that was more. Yeah. Oh, I was about to say, that was more like a control versus control, a 30-40 minute game, unlike the second or the first game where Walter won. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they were getting dangerously close to decking out, but we definitely saw they got through most of their deck. It was a much longer game, and like here we are, we're at a game 3 of the finals. Like how usually this is exactly what people ask for. It's a suspenseful match. Steadfast lost game 1. Now he won game 2. It's all going to come down to this final game to see who is crowned champion, at least for August, of the LorcanaHQ constructed tournament. And so I think these mulligans are going to be crucial. I think Steadfast recognizes how important the cauldrons and the magic mirrors are. He doesn't draw into any into his mulligan, so I know he's going to be hoping to find those later. We saw in both of the games that Steadfast won. Unfortunately, the first one having to be thrown out because of a misplay. Those magic mirrors and the Ursul's Cauldron, like I would say they won him those games because there were multiple times that Walter had something on board that needed to be dealt with, and Steadfast had the opportunity to filter through his deck and draw multiple cards a turn to find those removal pieces that he needed, or the Elsas that could stop Walter from questing. And so I think, again, this game is going to come down to who can draw the most, who draws into those removal pieces. Can Walter get out fast enough, and can Steadfast get either a Cauldron or Magic Mirror or both onto the field before Walter can get ahead of him?
Yep. Then we see man, Steadfast probably would have really liked to see Mirror in his hand and did not get a Mirror. He does have some card draw in the form of Maleficent and Friends on the Other Side. And we definitely see Walter kind of going off to a faster start with all of the Surgeon Pibs. Having said that, though, those are ink that Walter is not going to be able to play, though. So I wonder if they'll come back to really kind of bite him if or sting him if he ends up not being able to go fast enough, I guess. So I think that's the kind of constant tension in Lorcana, like the game as well, of each card that you play out is a card that you don't have in your inkwell. And so it's always like kind of each card that you ink you can't play, but each card that you play also can't be ink. And especially in a control kind of deck where you really want to get to your 5 or 6 cost it might make a difference. But I think Walter realizes that if his opponent gets draws into the mirror and stuff. He just doesn't have enough kind of card draw in order to compete with his opponent. And so he's really trying to go quickly. Even though other decks like Emerald has two or characters that can quest for 2 lore. Right now, Walter has a board that quests for 1 lore, but it's definitely a steady climb for Walter. It's tough though, especially because I do think that Walter is doing the right plays. Because I think recognizing that he won't be able to kind of play as strong of a long game as Steadfast because he doesn't have the mirrors. So he's really trying to put the pressure on Steadfast by just questing with as much characters as he can, especially with the evasive ones, and trying to put him on a faster clock, trying to play a little bit more aggro rather than control side of things.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think every turn that Walter can quest with a lot of his stuff and force Steadfast to respond and take trades, like that Aladdin Street Rat is a great card against Walter because it removes a lore that Walter has gained. But at the same time, it's a 3 ink 2/2. And so Walter is playing. I was laughing earlier. I don't know what a like pack of cats is called. I don't know what it's like. What the term is for having a bunch of cats. But he had 3 Sergeant Tibbs out on board. Just questing away. And so he's playing these 1 call Sergeant Tibbs, getting lore every turn, and Walter's not getting lore, having to challenge into all the stuff that Walter's doing. And this is it turn 5, turn 6? Walter's already at 6 lore, would be at 7 without the Aladdin. And exactly like you said, I think Walter just recognizes he has to go as fast as possible. He has to consider he can't just straight up quest with everything every turn because he doesn't have access to a ton of draw. So, if he just full quests this turn with Sergeant Tibbs and Maleficent Sorceress, if Steadfast decides to trade down with him, now Walter's just kind of left with nothing that he can do, which is not a good place for Walter to be in. But he definitely recognizes that he's done best when he's able to get ahead, especially every turn that he doesn't see Magic Mirror or an Ursula's Cauldron or something that is going to allow Steadfast to keep stuff in his hand and continue to respond to what Walter is doing. He's just trying to get to 20 as fast as he can. And I mean, we've already seen in the past 3 games that Steadfast has done a great job at reducing Walter's lore. And every single time that Walter has to take lore away, it's just even harder for him to push up to 20. So, trying to get there as fast as possible is going to be key for Walter to win this series.
And Walter is definitely recognizes that the shift Aladdin can come down, right? Yeah, and that's probably why he didn't quest with the Maleficent and the Sergeant Tibbs, because Aladdin, he has enough ink to shift the Aladdin, which can reduce Walter's lore. Right now, it is pretty rough because Walter would really like kind of characters that quests for 2 or 3 rather than a bunch of characters that quest for 1. But unless you're playing the control deck and you don't really have a good early game aggro plan there. At least the Jetsam is putting in some really good work, because one thing to note is other than hard removal, it is really difficult to deal with evasives, and that's why you start seeing a lot of even aggro decks run some more evasive cards, like the Tinkerbells and stuff, just because even for a control deck, evasives can be a challenge to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this matchup where there's so much removal and you're having to use these resources to stop your opponent from getting too far ahead, Jetsam is a 1 lore character. You don't want to have to waste something like a Dragonfire or something even stronger like an Elsa or a Maleficent on a card that's really not that much of a threat. Jetsam's more of a long-term threat in the sense of if he isn't, the longer he's not dealt with and the more he's able to gain lore over and over, that the returns start to increase a lot. But initially he's not a huge threat.
Yep. I think Walter accidentally thought the Kojin was a one-use item, putting it in his discard, but nope. Yeah, the Kojin you can just keep on using over and over again. That's what makes it so good. So
You know that's so interesting. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts with Lorcana coming out and a lot of new players, and something that seems to be a trend. Walter's certainly not a new player. That's just a
mm,
funny interaction that he's
mm,
done. But
yeah,
I've noticed a lot of people that haven't played many TCGs before just assume that an item is a one-use thing, and so it's always fun to see their reactions when they exert a dingle hopper or exert a magic mirror or something and then go to put it in their discard and I have to be like, Nope, that actually stays on board." And then they just get excited because they're like, oh, I get to use this multiple times.
definitely. And that kind of justifies the high cost of some of the items. For example, like it costs 4 to draw a card with Magic Mirror and so forth. But yep, we see the board clear come down. Now it's going to be a pretty close. Oh. Yeah, I was about to say that card goes on top of the deck, not into his hand there. But let's see. So, Ssteadfast has a Aladdin, no Pocket Watch, Elsa, and it's really Aladdin, Elsa. Jafar is a kind of good card where I don't know, like maybe Ink the Maui, play down the Jafar because at least it forces a removal because it does quest for 2. And once again, as control player, you really want to like ink almost every single turn. But I guess sometimes you just want to keep the Mauis because it's important to have as an option. For example, the Maui can now run into the Aladdin after quests. I don't think that in any world Jafar is going to quest unless Steadfast draws removal. Because he knows that his opponent has a Aladdin in on the board. So let's see. Both of those are nice. He's probably gonna want the Elsa. I would take the Elsa. Elsas are just so good. But nope. Plays out another Aladdin. We got some stare-offs here going on because now I think neither player wants to quest with the Aladdin, knowing that any progress made from questing is just going to be removed by your opponent's Aladdin running into you.
Yeah, it's kind of comical how different these games
Mm.
are. Like last game, it was such a grind. It was a really long game. Walter was sitting like
Oh.
17 lore for so long. Then Walter realized this game that he has to go fast, so he started
Mm.
going fast. He played a lot of Tibbs, played the Jetsam, got up to 9 lore. Steadfast was able to take him down a little bit, gain a lot of control on the board. Now Steadfast is up to 12 lore. This game is going so fast already, and
Yeah.
partially because neither player has been able to get it much card draw. We don't see the mirror on Steadfast board. I don't know that Walter's
Yep.
been able to play a bunch of cards that allow him to draw more cards. So like instead of being where we were last game, where both characters have a handful of cards and have an answer for everything under the sun, now we're just kind of in top deck territory where both players have just a couple cards in hand. They're just playing what they have. They're staring each other down, like you said, with the Aladdins and working through that. It's just really funny how different these matchups can be, even within the mirror match where players are playing virtually a deck that wants to do similar things.
Definitely. It's also like you mentioned, it was funny. That the more cards that both players have in their hands, the slower the pace of the game is. You think that with more cards you can do more things during your turn, but it actually is much harder to play as both players have cards in their hand. Um,
Yeah, right now, but both players are basically just drawing a card, and they have one or two options, and usually the obvious option comes to them, and they just throw a card onto the table and say, "All right, your turn."
yeah.
And with the nature of this mirror match, there's a lot of removal pieces. So a lot of times you play something on the board, and then the next turn, your opponent plays something that stops that character from being a problem, and then the same thing happens the next turn, and it just kind of keeps on happening over and over again until eventually one player is able to play a card that allows them to draw more cards and get more cards in hand like that, where they have to think through a bunch of different decisions.
Interesting.
But
Yeah.
we do see the Elsa come down. It's going
Yeah.
to stop that Aladdin from being able to ready the next turn, which is good because Aladdin is a threat for sure when he's able to challenge or quest.
And another Dragonfire, just so much removal. So I would definitely say like right now, Walter is getting some really good top decks. I am a little bit concerned now for Steadfast, just based off of the quality of cards in Walter's hand. But like I think right now, Steadfast kind of. I think what would really change the tides of the game is if Steadfast was able to draw a magic mirror, and I feel like that's kind of been the theme of the game. Of Walter's deck is actually really good if your opponent just doesn't draw into a magic mirror. So I feel like the games have really come down to in Steadfast deck, I feel like Steadfast must have filtered through so many cards now. Probably realistically Steadfast probably hasn't seen maybe 20 of the cards in his deck. And so not having seen a magic mirror for this long has just got to be so unlucky. Because essentially that means that the magic mirror is on like both of Steadfast's magic mirror is the last like 20 or like 15 or 10 cards in his deck. That's pretty unlucky there.
Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. Luckily, he keeps drawing removal cards that he needs to keep Walter slowed down because, in the long run, if he can eventually get to those mirrors, he should be able to catch up. He
Oh
just
boy.
has to dig far enough to find them. And, we see him draw a Be Prepared. He probably doesn't want to play a Be Prepared on a single card. But if Walter's board gets too out of hand, he's going to have to, especially since Walter.
Yeah. I would, if I were on Steadfast side, I probably would not play a Be Prepared on just a single Aladdin because that is an extra turn. But like he does have a queen, so that can be pretty awkward. So yeah, no, because if you play a queen, essentially it allows Walter to play out another card, and so you only get one card draw off of the queen before you need to play the Be Prepared. So maybe a Be Prepared would be right. But nope, he plays a queen. Because once again, Walter is only at 11 lore, so he's still Walter still has a little bit of ways to go before becoming a bit of a threat. And so now we see kind of what let's see what Walter does. If Walter just quests with the Aladdin without doing anything, or if he plays out either a Maleficent or a else. Oh, he doesn't. He can't even play out a Oh man, that's rough. Walter is only at 7 ink. He needs to ink. I didn't realize Walter has been surviving on 7 ink. That's pretty interesting. So yep. If that's the case, so Walter does play out the Elsa. And is he challenging with the Aladdin? Yeah, he probably to bring Steadfast down to, and then we'll see the Be Prepared come down here.
Jay, does Walter have any more cards in his hand? I think he's pulled the cards back into his second hand, so it's a little bit difficult for me to see
sorry. Yes, let me.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, he has one Maleficent in his hand.
Okay.
I think the reason is because Walter is constantly using the cauldron, and it constantly moves his hand back to the second hand. So he's just like, I might as well just use that as my normal hand because I know every single turn I'm gonna use the cauldron.
So that's a good draw from Walter. He gets the friends on the other side, which is going to allow him to fill his hand up just a little bit.
Yup.
He sees that Mickey. He knows he wants to put some pressure on with that, so he's going to put that onto the top of his deck.
and the be prepared, but we definitely see kind of the players stall out a little bit. At first, Steadfast was at 13, and Walter was at 8 or 9, and because of kind of the Aladdins, things got reversed. But yeah, no, I feel like these control matchups ultimately evolve into these longer term slugfests, and we still haven't seen a single mirror. What is going on here? Like, that has to be almost all of his deck, right? Ssteadfast. Imagine if, like, literally the 2 magic mirrors were the last 2 cards in Steadfast's deck this game. That would be so
Yeah.
unfortunate.
That would be very unfortunate. That I always think a lot of card games is statistics, right? Trying to figure out what's the likelihood of you drawing this or what's the likelihood of your opponent drawing that. And I always fear those outliers in statistics happening during a game that it really matters. And this may just be one of those where magic mirrors are stuck on the bottom of the deck and Steadfast just can't find them. The luxury of playing a Ruby Amethyst deck, though, is you run a lot of removal. So luckily for Steadfast, even without the mirrors, that Ursula's Cauldron has been able to do a lot of work, being able to filter into cards that are helping him remove Walter and helping Walter, or keeping Walter slowed down just a little bit. Like you mentioned before, Walter's been able to kind of flip the tables a little bit, and he was able to gain a lead on Steadfast, getting up to 13 lore instead of 8. And we see the Dragonfire go down to get rid of the Mickey. Maui's definitely not what Walter wants to see right now.
He can
probably
he
wants
can
to
ink
see.
it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Then
But
that's actually a great card for him to see. He wants to get up into those 9 inks so he can start playing the Maleficent.
Yo, definitely. We see the Elsa going on top of his deck. Really good quality draws. Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. But we see a magic mirror finally from no pocket. So yeah, he's gonna take that. Be prepared. It's man, it has to be coming up soon though, right? But
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, honestly, I think the best play would be for Steadfast to play out the Aladdin and make Walter play out a Maleficent to get rid of the Aladdin because he knows the Be Prepared is next on board. But regardless, Walter might play out a relevant card. Like I can totally see Walter playing out the Elsa, which is just gonna definitely hurt, because that's more cards that the Be Prepared is gonna hit. Be Prepared is just such a. It's really interesting. I think I noticed it's one of the most expensive rare cards, just because everyone wants to run that card now in any sort of Ruby deck. It's just very defining of a it's the definition of a card that you always have to keep in mind if you're playing against a Ruby player, right? But again, no magic mirrors. At this point, I'm actually kind of feeling for Steadfast there.
Yeah, I feel like this would be a totally different game had Steadfast just drawn a magic mirror. He's been able to hold Walter back just a little bit. Walter is just inching forward closer and closer. He's up to 15 lore now, and I think this game is going to come down to whether or not Steadfast continues to find those removal pieces, and if he ever finds this magic mirror, that it has to be just sitting on the bottom. Both of them have to just be sitting on the bottom of his deck.
Right. I do like Steadfast's recent play. Currently there was no reason for him to ink that Jafar because none of his cards cost 10 or more, but what he's probably thinking is, okay, well, I'm going to really want to draw into my magic mirror, so having more ink means I can draw into a magic mirror, draw cards, and do something along with it, right? And finally we see it, but unfortunately I think he also really wants to Dragonfire right now.
Yeah.
That's really rough. I think he has to. Oh, go ahead.
I was about to say we're
Yeah.
getting to a really dangerous point
Yeah.
with Walter being at
That's
15.
so rough. Yeah.
Steadfast doesn't have a removal piece in hand, and
Oh.
Elsa doesn't win next turn, but it gets him to 18, which puts him
Yeah.
dangerously close. And so it's extremely unfortunate
But
for
but
Steadfast. He
but
has to
this
put the
yeah.
mirror back on the bottom.
But the second mirror probably is close by, right? So
Oh yeah, I mean I
I
hope
think
so.
yeah. Because otherwise he would have to filter through another 32 cards to get back, because right now that magic mirror is the last card in his deck. Oh man.
I mean, this is really like this is getting to this
That's a
is I don't
friends,
even know what to
okay.
say. It's very stressful. Like this game
Friends
is
is
coming
good
down
on
to the
top, yeah.
wire.
Yep. So we're just gonna see two friends probably come down. Oh, nope. Or an Aladdin and friends. That works. Aladdin at least puts oh, and that's a good removal draw. So Ssteadfast is still hanging in there. 17, not even a guaranteed 17, because Walter might choose to not quest with the Maleficent. Yeah, no, this is getting close. This is another one of the games I can't call. Like like, even though, like, lore wise, we the advantage goes to Walter because he's at 15 and Steadfast is only at 6. Um just because of the X factor in the magic mirrors. If Steadfast didn't have magic mirrors, definitely the advantage would be with Walter, but oh, excuse me. But because of always the potential of just all of a sudden getting turbo card draw, means that it's always within Steadfast's realm to catch up. But we see another Elsa, and a Mickey, and just a lot of refill of his hand. So
Yeah,
it's gonna be rough. But
yeah.
we see some more removal.
I was about to say, Walter being able to fill up his hand like that is a little bit scary for Steadfast because we were playing this game where each player is basically top decking. Steadfast is
Mm,
trying to find removal. Walter's trying to find stuff to get him as close to 20 as possible, and be as threatening as possible. And now that Walter has a couple more options, he's able
mm,
to take a little bit more time to decide what he can play and be strategic about it. Even something like people may not realize, but even something as little as a Sergeant Tibbs being played, with it only being a one lore character, but something that's not worth spending a Dragonfire on or challenging into, that's just
mm.
one way that Walter can inch forward to 20, where
Yep.
maybe at the end of the game it matters.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and Steadfast, luckily, we see has two Be Prepareds and a Dragonfire in hand, so he can take care of some of the things like the Elsa, the Mickey, the Jetsam that's in hand. But like you said, it's so hard to figure out who's going to win this game because it's all coming down to how many resources can Walter force Steadfast to use. Does
Mhm.
there ever come a point where Walter plays something and Steadfast doesn't have an answer to it? And can Steadfast ever draw his second magic mirror so that he can start getting through these cards a little bit more consistently and finding those answers a little bit more consistently?
Definitely. Yeah, it's pretty close. That surprisingly, that Aladdin is going to be a thorn on Walter's side though, because it just makes questing with those Tibbs or one more characters all that much difficult. Actually though, Walter's probably really happy to see the Rafiki, because essentially what he can do is play out the Rafiki and run both the Maleficent and the Rafiki into the Aladdin to get it off the board, and then play out some of his other kind of uh cards to now they can start questing without kind of that worry of losing lore. But I wonder what Walter is going to choose to do. He could always just choose to play out like an Elsa to keep that Aladdin tapped down, but feels like it would be better to play out the Rafiki in there.
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to, what is
Yeah.
Walter, what's most important to Walter right now? Does he
Yeah.
want to tap down or does he want to exert the Aladdin and the Maleficent so that he can just get a little bit closer to 20 by getting that one extra lore with Maleficent, not having to worry, like you said, about the Aladdin coming in and stealing lore from him, which, yeah, it is a thorn in his
There's the
side.
second mirror.
He finally gets it, and he has
Wow.
11. He has 11 ink, so he should be able to play this
Wow.
mirror. And well, he doesn't have a way to draw it this turn, I don't think. But next turn,
No,
he'll be able
yeah.
to play the mirror and then draw stuff and be able to actually do things with it.
Yeah. So
And
this has to
that,
be
that
a
might
be
be the
prepared,
turning
right?
tide.
Yeah, this has
like,
to
I
be a be
think,
prepared. But also he can play out the pocket watch alongside of the be prepared, which is gonna be pretty nice.
yeah,
That
and
pocket watch does so much work.
that's going to be really scary for Walter because of the Aladdin Heroic Outlaw play. You know, if Steadfast starts drawing more Heroic Outlaws, well, now not only is Steadfast drawing extra cards every turn with Magic Mirror, but he has to worry about the from hand Aladdin Heroic Outlaw play to take that 4 lore swing that Walter really doesn't want to see because he's getting so close to 20.
Right. I wonder if Walter's gonna run out that Mickey. Yeah, so it has to be a be prepared. So Ssteadfast actually has enough. No, he doesn't. He does not have enough to play out the mirror and the be prepared, because if he had a mirror already on board, he could play out the be prepared and the mirror. But now that he knows that he's a Dragonfire, he is gonna probably play out the mirror, tap to draw the Dragonfire and use the Dragonfire on the Mickey. I mean, that would be the most efficient way of being able to draw a card and save the be prepared. So that's exactly that's exactly what we're gonna see here.
Yeah,
Or
and
5,
I mean, like,
and gets just enough.
literally the turn that we see Magic Mirror come into play, we see the power of the Ursula's Cauldron and the Magic Mirror combo, being able to know what card you're going to draw, know if it's going to be the answer you need or not, and then being able to draw it with the Magic Mirror, you know, resetting the board. Now, if I'm Walter, I'm definitely getting scared, because now this is where the tides start turning and Steadfast can really start taking control of this game.
Right. That Ursula is a great card to see, though, because it also gives a little bit of card draw. But yeah, I think the dynamics of this game definitely shifts a little bit now to can Walter get out to 20 lore? He's only 4 lore away, but those 4 lore can feel like a mile away playing against a control deck. So and yeah, Steadfast just has so much control stuff where if he draws oh man, though he doesn't have quite enough ink to do everything, huh? Yeah, so this is another case in point of if you're playing control, try to have you always want to have more ink than you think, right? You think that like your highest cost card is 9, but now if you want to play a Maleficent and draw cards, you need 13 all of a sudden, right? So most of the time I play control, I really enjoy just sitting at a nice 15, 16 lore. If you're playing the brooms version of control, you actually, if you can get to like 20 ink, that's like enough for you to use Elsa to tap down your opponent's character and play out the Mickey brooms combo. So ink is always really good to have. It's tough to get to that much ink, but we can see like having 11 ink is still quite one short. What Ssteadfast really wanted to do was to play out the Elsa and to draw a card there. But having said that, I definitely think Ssteadfast has stabilized quite a bit. He forced out a be prepared from Walter, which I think Walter really doesn't want to have to play be prepared if he's only like 4 lore away from winning. I wonder how both players are gonna start playing this game now, because Walter has 17 cards in his deck. Ssteadfast has 19. But we probably know that both players' decks, the last hand 10 or so cards are probably pretty low quality, because keep in mind both players have had that also Ursula's Cauldron out for a long time. So as it keeps on cycling cards, players are likely to put worse and worse cards at the bottom of their deck. And so that, like, eventually, like, it's just gonna be uh, cards that aren't gonna make too big of an impact, and it really may end up coming down to a player running out of cards in their deck. Even though Walter is pretty close at 16 and both players still have like 18 cards in their deck, it can pretty quickly especially with the amount of control like both players have. Walter still has 2 be prepared. Honestly, if I was Walter, I might just save the be prepared this turn and Maleficent, and just wait to run out a Maui when Ssteadfast quests. But no, we just see Maleficent bounce his opponent's Maleficent, destroying it. But I keep on saying, in the control matchup, it's really difficult to like get the most use out of your Mauis. So if you have the opportunity, like if your opponent is at low lore, and you can allow your opponent to quest, a couple of times, let your opponent quest and then run your Maui into their character. To essentially what you're doing is trading your opponent's lore total for an extra removal spell, right? So it's interesting to see what Walter decides to do. And I wonder at what point either player starts to go easy on the card draw. So right now both players are still kind of drawing cards. And once again, like playing out the removal rather than holding on for the Maui could end up becoming pretty relevant. Oh, what happened with the 4-card draw? Oh, okay. So I think Walter accidentally pressed 4 instead of 2, so he just returned the the 2 later cards back into his deck, and then kind of just effectively drew 2 cards there. So yeah, we're starting to see kind of the cards that were put back to the bottom of both players' decks now. I definitely remember seeing the Ursula's Cauldron being put onto the bottom, and now it's coming back. Now we're probably going to see a lot more Gastons and not super relevant cards from both players. So even now, I think we might see Ssteadfast not drawing a card from his deck. It'll be really interesting if he does, because I know kind of one thing to keep an eye out for is trying to make sure you always have one more card than your opponent in your deck. So I wonder if at what point Ssteadfast chooses to go easy on the card draw here. And we see another item come down, the shield now. So it'll be I this is my prediction. I predict that this game will go into a whoever decks their opponent out. Given that both players still have some removal left in their deck, and they're starting to draw into not as relevant cards. Though right now I do see I think Walter has Maleficent that's a threat, and a Elsa, I think, on top of his deck, or something on top of his deck. So it's let's see. So right now the relevant threats are the Rafiki and the Maleficent. Though the Aladdin is good for kind of just slowing down your opponent. So I think that Maui is even better. Yeah, so immediately we see that Maui go on top of the deck. Does Ssteadfast Ssteadfast still has room to draw one more card, putting him at 13 cards, even with Walter. And he can run out the Maui, I guess. Is he going to run out the Elsa? Okay. It's probably the Elsa's gonna tap down the Rafiki and the Maleficent because those are the relevant threats. I don't think he cares as much about the Maui. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
because the
think he wants
Maui
to
can
make.
quest. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think he wants to make sure that Walter can't quest and get any closer to 20 than he already can. You know, we see the Aladdin Street Rat coming down, which is going to delay Walter a little bit more as well. Just for everybody listening, I want everyone to understand the way Lorcana works. The rules are, whoever the first player is that has to draw a card and can't loses. So that's what we're mentioning when we say something like deck out. Both players are getting really low on cards. We can see Walter only has 10 cards in his, or sorry, he had 12 cards in his deck. Steadfast only has 14. If either of them get to a point where they have to draw a card at the start of their turn and they can't, then they automatically lose. Something that I wanted to mention is, Jay, as you were talking, they filtered through a lot of cards in their deck. And I can't exactly see what's in Walter's hand. I see one Be Prepared, and I don't know how many other Be Prepareds he has.
He
But
has
with
yeah. I moved the
okay,
camera a little bit. Yep.
okay, so two Be Prepareds. A lot of these removal pieces have been played, and so like not only are you having subpar cards that you're drawing, but this might all like I could see this going either who decks out first or who can put enough characters on the board without the other opponent having anything to remove. I think that's less likely since we see three Be Prepareds in both hands at this point. If anybody gets too large of a board state, they can play Be Prepared and get rid of most of it. But this is we're definitely getting to the end part of the game where there's not as much removal left, and it's really going to come down to like, can Walter just like crawl his way to 20 lore before Steadfast is able to catch up, or force Walter to deck out if Steadfast is paying attention to how many cards he has in his deck versus Walter has in Walter's deck.
Yup, definitely. So, ironically, this is one of those cases where the magic mirror starts becoming not as useful, right? Like, you have it to draw more cards, but once you're on, like, kind of the danger of not having any more cards to draw, it kind of just sits not being as useful there. So we see kind of both sides of the benefits and the cons of the magic mirror there.
Yeah, I definitely think if Walter's able to squeeze through this game and win, it was all because of those magic mirrors not being able to be played for just the reason you said. Like, once we're so late into the game,
Yeah.
Steadfast has to be careful of how many cards he's drawing. And like, there may come a point in the game state where Steadfast is forced to draw a card in order to stop Walter from winning, to get a
Yeah.
card in hand that he doesn't have. And at that point, Steadfast is going to have less cards in his deck than Walter is, and Walter's going to be at the advantage, where if he can stall Steadfast out long enough, then Steadfast will deck out.
Yep. Well, we see Walter inching towards his win condition of 20 lore. Specifically, I do think that Steadfast is running out of removal. And I think that really ends up being the issue in this game. So, and Walter Steadfast doesn't have a way to put his cards in the discard pile back into his deck. So if we just do a quick look, I'm pretty sure all of the Be Prepareds are gone. 1, 2, 3. Wow. 4. Yeah, all of the Be Prepareds are gone. 18 actually, or unless I only count. Oh no, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, all 4 are gone. Elsa, Spirit of Winter. 1, 2, 3. There might be another Spirit of Winter that can save Steadfast. Unless Steadfast only runs 3 Spirit of Winters.
Oh, he does.
He
I just
does.
looked at the deck list. Yeah, there's only 3 Spirit
Oh
Adventures.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, that would
And
have been a great card too, because like one of the things that Walter can do now is knowing, probably having a good idea of how much removal Steadfast has left to draw.
Mhm.
Walter doesn't really care too much if he quests with a character and then it immediately gets traded the next turn, because
Yeah.
he is literally just inching closer and closer. So like
The-
he's fine with questing with this queen and then the queen going to the discard.
yeah,
And like
but
the Jetsam
yeah.
evasive. So the
The
Jetsam is going to
evasive,
get,
yeah.
yeah, the evasive is going to do a lot of work because there's
Yeah.
no way for Steadfast to deal with it right now, which basically means that Steadfast is on a 2-3 turn
Yeah.
clock.
Yo. That's yeah. I think Steadfast may end up having to do a last Hail Mary of draw all. So he has like 3 other minis in his deck. Just draw out as many cards as he can, plop them all down, and kind of try to race.
Yeah, this is really coming down to the
Yeah.
wire. Like what a finals
man.
series we have
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that if you looked at his deck, you'll realize that he doesn't have any more removals to deal with the Jetsam. So he might just end up having to draw. Those Mauis are so like, if they could only quest, man, Maui, why you do
Yeah.
this to us?
Yeah. And I mean, this goes back to what you were saying though, like using removal cards when maybe you could have used a Maui. You know, like it's things like this that are really coming into play at the very end of the game.
Yeah.
Decisions that were made turns ago.
Definitely.
Deciding the outcome of this game.
Yeah. Oh man. And the queen, see, like the quality of card draw is definitely a lot worse from both players, but it is exactly enough, I think, for Walter to get the job done. So, oh, and Walter still has an Ursula in his deck, so that's yeah. But let's see if Ssteadfast has one more removal. I just counted so many minis left in his deck. And queens.
Yeah,
let's see.
I think Ssteadfast
He
just
has
has
an
to like
Elsa. Oh, yeah. But the Elsa isn't gonna help against evasives, right? That evasive is just so.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that's game.
Okay, so I think that's game. I don't think there's anything that Ssteadfast can draw to get rid of this evasive, which is essentially all that he needs to get rid of. So he's probably going to think through it, play what he can do, and then we'll let Walter quest to 20, and that should be game.
Yep. That's yeah, that magic mirror being like the last 2 cards in Ssteadfast deck really was no bueno.
I mean, we talked about it in every single game. You know, whether or not Ssteadfast could get those magic mirrors down quickly and draw through his deck, made or broke the games.
Yep, but tough battles for both players. And kudos to Walter for just sticking through what is a really tough matchup, and congratulations to Walter for
there it is to Walter. Walter is the LorcanaHQ constructed champion for August.
He went undefeated too, right? Like
Walter did not lose a single game.
Really impressive.
He tied 1 game, and I'm sure he'll mention this when we interview him later. But you know, he said he just threw this deck together right before he was supposed to play. So this, I don't even know how extremely thought out this was, but what an exciting series to finish it off in the finals. We ended up playing 4 games, lots of drama and not really, there wasn't any drama. Ssteadfast accidentally misplayed to a point where they couldn't reset the game state, so we ended up having 4 games being played, and then Walter ended up winning game 1, and like, you know, that's extremely unfortunate for Ssteadfast. And so Walter was able to squeak through and win the entire tournament. Walter's champion, at least for August.
Definitely. Congratulations, Walter. Just amazing played by both players. Tough, long, sluggy fights there. So kudos to both players for doing the best, and it was just so cool watching both players kind of figuring out the thought process, their decision making, how to make some of those tough decisions, kind of the nail biting, trying to draw into the mirrors, and all of that good stuff. So, and we
Yeah,
see
although
Walter. Yeah,
I'm gonna
although
run to
it
the
was
bathroom,
yeah,
so I'll be
yeah,
quick.
go
That was a
go
long
for it,
time.
Walter.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like although it was a really long series, I don't think we could have asked for a better final. You know, going into all 3 rounds, it was definitely a nail biter the entire time. And you know, you love to see it from a casting standpoint. I'm sure the players themselves were sweating a lot because they were on the line, but it was super exciting to be able to cast and to commentate for everybody else. Going all the way to game 3, and then game 3 being such a nail biter.
Definitely, man. It's and we have Steadfast too with us here. It is as we predicted. Hey, as we predicted, it was a very long, uh, match and long commentating period. So thank you everyone for sticking with us through the end of the game. And congratulations both Steadfast and Walter for a really tough long battle this evening. So
Yeah, I have to commend you, Steadfast, seriously for recognizing the misplay that happened in game 1 and just saying we're gonna clean the slate, we're gonna start back over because that's extremely awesome to see in the community. Great sportsmanship for you to do. So like, just kudos to you for doing that by itself. And like Jay said, congratulations to both of you being up here in the very top, defeating everybody else. Man, I feel so bad for you in that last game, just filtering and filtering, trying to find those magic mirrors and not finding them until basically it was too late.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
honestly, it was just rough because it was so long, and on our end, the game was like incredibly laggy. So
Yeah.
it was like the worst, honestly. But we had fun. We were joking around the whole time. So
It was very intense with doing Ursula's Cauldron every single move, I mean,
yeah,
just saying
yeah.
cauldron back and forth was a experience in itself.
If anybody's doubting Cauldron still,
It's amazing.
just tell them about this game because it helped us find everything we needed. So.
Yeah, that think at one point, Walter, you just decided to leave your hand into your second hand because every single turn you're using the cauldron, so which moves yeah.
Yeah, that was because I've tried before to do what Steadfast was doing, but there's been other times where I've accidentally just completely messed it up, and I'm like, I'm not
Yeah.
touching it. Like the lag made some things harder to click, so it just was, yeah.
Definitely. Well, that's another kind of thing. Well, we'll make sure Brandon and I to kind of work on fixing. Hopefully, for the future, just the TTS experience. Hopefully, will be a little bit seamless and better for players too. So, really appreciate that feedback as well.
Yeah, I want to ask. So there should be another tournament coming up in September. Don't hold me to this. I think it might still be over TTS instead of webcam, but that might change. After this extremely long run, are both of you planning to try to go through it again and do another month's worth of tournament play, or are you going to take a break and rest for a little while?
I haven't really thought about it. I guess initial reaction, I probably would not run a control deck.
No.
I mean, just because I don't really want to run back the same deck again, but also it took so long. I mean, so that's my initial reaction. I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, part of me, the only reason I would run anything close is because I love Aladdin, but part of me would just want to try to run like not an all Aladdin deck, but maybe like a 12 Aladdin deck or something just for funsies. So it would have to be something meme worthy because oh my gosh, each game being like 2+ hours just burnt me out mentally. Like, good
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah.
Like the whole match took almost like 2.5 hours, which is generally how long like a lot of like 3 round tournaments are, right? So I think really early on we mentioned kind of like this concern that players have, and I think it's a pretty valid concern of if we have like kind of control or like matchups that take a long time, how are tournaments going to deal with kind of this, or is like something gonna change with how like tournaments or matches end up being running? But I don't know. Like it seems like case in point, the control mirror today between the both of you, it takes quite a long time, and a lot of games that like I played on Pixelborn where I play a control deck also take just a really long time. And not only does it take a lot of time, it's also really draining for the players. I just like feel like I'm like almost done with Lorcana for the day after just playing one game of something like that, right? And so I wonder, hopefully, like either like some new decks come out that can deal with control and kind of shift it a little bit away from the meta, or maybe there'll be some better cards as more releases come out in the future that make things like go a little bit faster. I won't I'll say I've never been a fan of power creep, but this may be a case where I will appreciate having some power creep just to speed up the pace of the game a little bit.
I think a time limit just solves it, honestly. Because the time limit will discourage you to play a stall type deck unless you know you can win the first game.
But
So.
yeah,
Agreed.
but wouldn't that make it unfun for both players involved if like now like you're playing this weird like, oh, I think I'm only gonna have time for one game, and like everything's on the stake. I don't know. It's strange, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have to. I think the game has these tools that allow you to stall out the game so much, and I think it's fun that you have this such a wide variety and depth of strategy you can go for. But at some point, like you said, like we just can't be playing this long in a best of three, especially if other people are playing like win on turn 6 style decks.
Right, like an aggro deck, like an aggro mirror matchup, like somebody's winning in like 5-10 minutes.
We could have each had 80 cards in our deck and probably gone another hour.
Yep. And one thing I did notice, Steadfast, was you ran specifically a 64 card deck, right? Was that specifically intended in case you ran into a mirror, just to have a little bit of extra? Yeah.
On the last 2 matches, the second to the one I won, I could have potentially milled Walter out if we had waited a bit longer. And then in the very last match, we were kind of competing for it, but I ran out of removal first. So, I mean, I've won a bunch of matches by doing that in the 64 cards. I just prefer that over running brooms. So,
got it. Did you and I haven't like kept track of your games throughout the tournament or like some of the final A bracket. Did you ever win any games through decking your opponent out, or is it mostly just like through testing?
I think I won one game. I don't remember who it was against, but if you're curious, I can go find out later. It's
interesting because I feel like quite a lot of things have to go right too, right? Because you also have to be playing another similar type control deck that draws cards. A lot of times I feel like when you're playing a control mirror, but if the opponent doesn't run like magic mirrors, or like it's like playing Sapphire, like ramp. A lot of times you're perfectly good just outdrawing and like getting all of your cards and then just like playing everything and outvaluing your opponent there. But specifically against kind of the control mirror matchup where both players have magic mirrors and stuff, that's when decking out becomes much more likely, because both players like feel like they can't get enough to win by lore and wants to play safer by trying to deck the other person out.
Yeah, it became tricky because for a while I thought Steadfast had less cards than me, so I'm like, oh, okay, I'll play Maleficent, draw another card. And then it hit me when I was down to like 12. I'm like, wait, I technically have less cards. And I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I just have to stop and hope he uses Magic Mare if we do deck out completely. But that
And I
was,
think-
ooh.
And I think I had 14 cards at that time, and
Yep,
I knew that. And so, and I knew that I was out of Be Prepareds and I was out of Dragonfires, and I had used 3 dragons, and I think I determined that I'd inked the 4th. So it was basically like I had no tools to stall 10 turns. So I just had Maui and stuff, and I couldn't find the Elsa in time, and he only had the quest for 4. So, yeah.
Yeah, had he
Very-
got
very
the Elsa
close,
the
yeah.
turn before, it would have been a much different ending, I feel like. I mean, I think it would have come down just to decking at that point.
Well, yeah, I think if I had used Mirror to find the Elsa, I would have been at I would have been 2 cards less than you, so you would have just the table would have just
True.
turned and you would have just stalled me out
Yeah.
because you had like 2 Be Prepareds in your hand. So
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
with
not gonna
Ursula right after, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like, regardless of the outcome, you guys really gave us a show. Like, I know it was so long, and I'm sure your brains are just like melting right now, having played 4 games out essentially. But like, man, like especially there at the end, the nail biters of was somebody gonna deck out? How much removal do they have? Is Walter gonna be able to get to 20 fast enough? It was extremely fun to commentate and extremely fun to actually watch. So it was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I'll pose this question. I have the same question for both Walter and Ssteadfast. I guess I can ask Ssteadfast first. So what are your overall impressions and thoughts about this tournament that's been run? Did you kind of go into it because Medina just was like, hey, join this tournament? Did you go into it wanting to try out certain kind of archetypes or decks? And then kind of what as kind of you played through the tournament, any kind of changes in feeling? Did you enjoy it? What's your overall kind of thoughts in regards to this tournament? Oh, and I think we just dropped Brandon. Or did he have to go? Oh,
He's back.
He's back. Okay.
Technical difficulties.
So basically, there was a constructed, or not a constructed. There was a starter deck tournament before this one, and I joined that, and I did horrible because I was like, man, I really just want to construct a deck. And so when this one popped up, I just joined it, and then I remember other than today, the only match I lost was my very first match, and I was like, oh, I guess and at that point I was convinced that like Amethyst Purple was the best, or Amethyst Ruby was the best deck, and I was like, dang, was I wrong about that? But then I guess I just got unlucky in that first match and ended up doing well after that, and then what do you know, the finals is Amethyst Ruby, so maybe it is the best deck, I don't know. But it's certainly performed well here, and then in a couple other tournaments it's been doing pretty good, so we'll see.
Nice.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just
I
going to
wanted-
ask. Go ahead, Brendan.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Just talking about that, I wanted to ask both of you really quick. You don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but having played this deck for so long, and I'm sure playing more of it in between this tournament, where do you think its weaknesses are? It definitely is the most popular deck right now, one that a lot of people are running, and I see a lot of people saying that it is the best deck in the format. But where, if you were to build a deck to specifically counter this one, and having played it and being experienced with it, what direction would you try to take? Either of you.
I mean, Steadfast is the one who knows more about the knowledge of the game, but I will say on Pixelborn, I've played this deck maybe like at least 80 times during the tournament just to practice. I think I've only won maybe about 20% of the games. I do not think it's that good. If you play anything aggro, or if you play Steel Sapphire, it just gets its butt kicked every single time. Like, if you play anything that is not aggro, it wins every time. So it's just, I kept running into Steadfast, Lemon Lime deck in Pixelborn, which didn't help. But I mean, when you play anything not aggro, it's the best deck. But anything aggro, it loses. It's a rock paper scissors.
I think I will say I think the weakness, at least in my list, is it's trying to do too many things at the same time. Because of the Lemon Lime deck, which definitely beats this deck, probably, I don't know, more than 50% of the time.
Easily.
Because of that, I have to run 4 Befuddle, and I have to run at least 3 Gaston, and I have to run at least 2 Rafiki, and all this stuff. But then it's like when I'm playing a mirror match, that stuff really doesn't help. And so, because the deck has like a solid answer to everything, it doesn't have a perfect answer to certain things, if that makes sense. I mean, you could probably say that about any deck, right? But yeah, the Lemon Lime definitely, the like Emerald, Amber, Ruby can definitely defeat it. So,
And
I think
kind
there
of
might be a couple other decks, but
Yeah.
I don't know yet exactly. The one Franz played against me was pretty good against my deck, actually.
And the recent uprising of Amber Steel, I think, is very notable, and I don't think it does horribly against this deck. It's funny. I think honestly, one of the biggest weaknesses of kind of this deck is the fact that it's one of the meta like strongest decks, which means it's in the spotlight for longer, which I think means that people know about it and know like kind of what it does and its tech and everything. And when you know like something, you just have a little bit of an edge or like advantage just playing against it. Whereas a lot of times when you're playing up against something that's a little bit newer that like you aren't as sure about, you're more easily likely to run into traps or mistakes playing against those decks, right? So the fact that now everyone knows about this deck and knows kind of what they're trying to do and how it wins is actually kind of a point against it almost.
Yeah, agreed. Because now it's so popular. I mean, it was funny just the number of articles that were written about me and Steadfast the past few days in YouTube videos, which I just think is hilarious to me. I don't know, it's just kind of cool. But it's just everyone's talking about this deck, and then there's videos making like, how do you counter this deck? And I'm like, by the time, in a week, it might not even be the best deck because everyone's focused on it, which is a cool feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think. I think technically the game's not even out in retail, so
Yeah.
like you said, a week from now, it could be the 4th best deck or something. Who knows?
Yeah, well, we will have to see in future tournaments. Like I mentioned before, the Lorcana HQ should be putting on another tournament in September. So anybody that's watching, look out for that. I don't want to keep you guys too long because, again, I'm sure your brains are pretty fried, and if you're on the East Coast, you maybe getting close to bedtime.
Yeah.
But congratulations to both of you for making it so long in this tournament. You both have done very well, even having made it all the way here. And so just wanted to give you guys the opportunity to shout out a YouTube channel or a Twitter or anything that you want to before we sign off. And Steadfast, we'll start with you. So just go ahead and shoot, man.
Sure. I have a YouTube channel. If you search Steadfast Lorcana, it should pop up on YouTube. And I plan on putting out a video breaking down at least the semifinals. I'm not sure if anybody wants to see the mirror match, but if you do, I guess I can break down the finals. And then I actually pulled an enchanted card yesterday,
Ooh.
so I'll
What?
share that soon on my YouTube. And then other than that, congrats to Walter, and thanks to you two for casting everything.
Thank you for
That was
thank you for just allowing us to stream the game to everyone and sharing kind of the gameplay and stuff. So definitely appreciate having you with us.
Yeah, and mine is just my name, WalterYensid. I put the YouTube link in the description. I've fallen behind uploading because of work, but I also just pulled an enchanted, so it's another
Everyone's
box
pulling
battle.
enchanteds.
Third one
Oh
in
man,
a
where's
row,
my
box
enchanted?
battle. But I'm gonna upload that one tomorrow, hopefully. And I do have a fun video idea with Ssteadfast, so I'm gonna try to work that out and go from there. But yeah, I'm just glad we had a tournament because it was fun. Met a lot of amazing people, and it was just a really good time. I didn't think I was gonna win a single game, and this is a weird feeling, man.
Well, congrats! I think you didn't lose a single game, right, Walter? So how does that feel to go undefeated in one of the
If
first tournaments ever?
I mean, it feels weird, especially because I mean, as a few people will tell you, a lot of these games I had to come back, 19-1, 16-0. I mean, even my game versus Teddy, I think he won the first one, and then I thought I was going to lose both times. So just everything has been come back, and it's a weird tournament. Like, I'll gladly take it, but it was insane.
Really cool. Cool. And I guess yeah, any last questions for the players? I don't have any, and my mind now is also kind of shot. So it's been a pretty long evening. But I'll just go ahead and just plug my stuff, I guess. So my name is Jagu or Jillinin. You can find my content on YouTube at Jillinin or Jagu, and then on X or Twitter, you can look me up #Jillinin. I tend to kind of post stuff or videos that are released on YouTube. I tend to put onto Twitter there, so you can find me there.
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube as well under B²24. You can also find me on Twitter or on X with B²24 capital YT. Yeah,
Go subscribe to Brandon B Squared. You're almost at 1,000, right? So
I actually passed 1,000 the other day, and I'm extremely grateful. Yeah, extremely grateful to everybody who supports me in that. So be sure to check out these guys too. Everybody here makes awesome content, to be honest with you, and it's so diverse. There's so much to watch. But to all the viewers, thank you guys for tuning in and watching. This is so much more fun when we know that there's people watching us and we're not talking to ourselves. If you haven't joined the LorcanaHQ Discord and you're watching from Twitch, you should be able to find the Discord link in the About Me page or in the description. And anybody who's listening in the Discord, you guys, go over to the Twitch, follow the Twitch so you guys can be notified when we have more live streams like this, because we're not over. We're just getting started, people.
Definitely. Can't wait until there's some more interesting gameplay. New cards, gameplay, tournaments. Man, Brandon, we got plenty of stuff coming ahead of us. So
Yeah, you're right about that. All right. If